Call to order. Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Ed meeting April 8, 2019. Welcome. So we're going to kick off with some public comments first, and then we're going to move right into Louis ADPietro and Nora Bertacci here to talk about the world language.
Any superintendent report?
Yeah, superintendent. I have so many things right here I'm going through.
We always got excited because of the big package.
Yeah, so I got ahead of myself. We're going to start off with, primarily because I don't have my agenda here. There it is. Announcements from superintendent.
Thank you. Yes, we are going to be going to a presentation by the high school with respect to some changes in the foreign language program, and we've distributed leaflets that will help to explain, and we'll hear what those are. I'm pleased to say that our new superintendent has been in the district quite a bit. As a matter of fact, last week, and again, well, she was here the whole day, and she's coming back for another 2 days later in the week. She would have been here. She said she didn't want to miss a board meeting, but their board tonight is deciding on the budget. So she had to get her priorities straight, at least for tonight. But she's been very, very active and very excited and enthusiastic about starting here at Hastings. As you know, part of that story is to look for a replacement, not a replacement, not at all. I should say, look for an assistant superintendent, as the board earlier had agreed that they wanted to do that to fill what had been historically the director of curriculum and instruction, looking to fill that position. So I've just handed out some materials as well to the board. These are in notebook fashion, and they include some resumes, and they include some discussion with respect to possible process. The board, as the board knows, and I've tried to keep you up to date with everything that our small committee is doing in the central office to find good applicants. We really have been very busy, and last week we had over 100 applications, and last week we interviewed close to 20 applicants, and we've narrowed that number down. And the next steps...
Interview them in person, Charlie?
Yes. Our next step is to get the board, of course, more fully involved, along with the larger school and community. We have a couple of board members, in fact, tomorrow coming over to look at some of the resumes, and we've had some help from another board member on that before. But certainly, we're reaching a point where the board needs to take more charge, I would say, be more involved than they have been heretofore. It's not that you should have been more involved up until now. I think what we've been doing is appropriate to sort of get things teed off, and now it's time to talk about how we will want to engage the public as well as the board to a greater extent. It is our hope that we can select someone, and also, of course, we're going to enlist the participation of teachers and administrators and others in the school community to help with their input. And this is very exciting to work with the new superintendent in this process, because you'll recall we had always intended to this timing so that the new superintendent would have input and to the board on the selection of the candidate. She's very excited about that. I think that's going to be a nice feature that we're working in that direction. So the search goes on, and I think that at the end, I would say, the time we come back from the break, we should be, as I mentioned, getting the board and the larger community more involved. And I would say also that we've been very pleased with the quality of applicants, just as a general statement. Really some very good people to choose from. So we'll see how all that plays out, but to keep you informed, if you could look at those folders, I think you'd find it interesting in terms of more detail of what we've been doing and what we hope to do. One word, though, that is a little bit difficult. We've lost, at least now, we've lost 2 people just in the past week who went to other schools. And the reason they were being hired by other schools is because they were very good. And this happens to be the peak season of when schools are hiring these positions. So we can't, hang about. We need to move the process along as fast as is convenient and possible, or else we could be losing other good. In fact, we happen to know that other candidates that we've interviewed and would be among those that we might consider are being considered by other schools as we speak. So with that in mind, we are going to have to keep on top of this.
Charlie, I'm just looking at your memo, and I'm not sure if this is probably more of a question for Doug. When you wrote to us on Friday, you identified the members, the people who were reviewing resumes as yourself, Lynn Walker, Fee Goodman, and Valerie. And as I'm reading this now, I see that it also says there was assistance from board member Lauren Berman. Lauren's very nice of you to volunteer your time, but I think this goes to an issue of board governance that that's been on my mind really the whole year, and I really haven't said anything, but seeing this now, I think it's appropriate. Both Nanisha and I had reached out saying that we wanted to look at resumes. We had plans last week, and each of us, for personal reasons, had to cancel. We're scheduled to go tomorrow. But it's the issue of a board member being asked to do something without asking the full board. And then the full board finding out after the fact. So, for example, Lauren was asked to draft a curriculum statement unknown to at least some of us, and then we found out after it had been created, and it would have been something that I would have liked to jointly draft with you, and, there may be other members as well. I heard that Lauren is the consultant on revising the website. This was never put out to the board, and for this, what I think is better governance is rather than selecting somebody and then the board finding out, like right now at a board meeting, is, I'm not trying to self-aggrandize, but what I used to do last year, I'd put out volunteer opportunity, who would like to, and that way things are doled out fairly. So, for example, I don't think you've asked me to do anything the entire year, and I would have very much liked to have been involved with this. And again, I'm not faulting Lauren, nice for you to have the time and the energy, and that's wonderful. But I think in terms of good board governance, more transparency is better, so that if there's a task to be done, the entire board is invited, and whoever has the time or the expertise volunteers. And if there are too many people, wow, what a terrific problem to have, rather than something happening without the rest of the board knowing and finding out, as I said, right now after the fact at a board meeting.
Well, I should say that Lauren had no official position on the committee. She just came by a couple of times and helped out with going through the resumes. But I must say, I haven't asked the board for much help, nor has the board directed me to any great extent in terms of how we go about it. What I have done is, based upon my years of knowledge of recruiting many people for positions like this, done the obvious things to keep the ball rolling. I know the board was extremely busy during the search for the consultant as well as the bond, and there's been so many things. I just thought I was given the assignment, I'd get the ball rolling, but it is we have every intent, and I also will mention that you're going to come over tomorrow, which is good, and look at the resumes. And certainly going beyond that, I think the board is going to be required to define in any case a little bit more clearly the extent that you'd like to be involved.
And Charlie, just to be clear, I'm talking about a question of board governance, that if there is a role for a board member to play, be it an official member of a committee or, a helpful person, I believe the best governance is to put it out to the entire board, or at a minimum, if such a decision is made, to at least inform the board. I think the failure to do either of those is poor governance. And I think it leads to a fractured board.
Well, I just hope I'm not causing any confusion.
I'm not blaming you, Charlie.
Well,
I'm not blaming you.
I was just going to say, though, there was no intent to exclude people or include people. We just needed to get something going.
I mean, to answer that one question specifically, I mean, I don't remember how it all happened, but I do remember saying that it's possible that someone from the curriculum committee would make sense. From there, I don't know where the decision went, quite
Well, I'm on the
frankly.
curriculum committee. Actually,
so-
I thought we decided to make it a full board committee, but it never met. But I still remain a member of the curriculum committee.
So again, I don't know all the decisions that went down and how that occurred. As far
Lauren,
as,
maybe you can elucidate. Who asked you to help?
I think I just made it known that I was interested to help whenever, just as everyone on the board who's interested said that they would be interested to look at resumes. And I just said I was available, and every board member is available to look at the resumes that are there. And I'm sorry if you were not able to go in when you said you were going to go in. I was available, committee. I haven't interviewed anyone. I just looked at the resumes.
And again,
Does
I'm not
anyone
blaming you.
else
I'm
have-
thanking you for your service, but I think in terms of good governance, more transparency is critical.
You're all invited to.
I would just say point taken, and I think we should move on.
Thank you, Jody.
Public comment?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Destin, and I'm a Hastings-on-Hudson resident. I know you're going to talk about staffing, and I'm excited to hear what that discussion is about. Before you do, I just want to sort of reaffirm why I feel it's important for TAs to be involved in content areas in 1 through 4. We have built a model here in Hastings in the ICT classes that evolved from first the co-teacher just coming in for 2 hours, then it being a co-teacher with an aide, and finally going to the co-teaching model with the teaching assistant. The teachers have been trained on this model. It's working incredibly well. And in fact, in a district where special education isn't fully optimized all along the way, I think it's one of those spots where it actually is working really, really well. For the younger children, particularly, having the ability to do the station teaching, because teaching assistants cannot just, I'm sorry, my voice is really weird today. Teaching assistants cannot just reteach, but they can teach content. It really allows for heterogeneous groupings, whereas if you take that away, there could be more homogeneous groupings with the special ed teacher teaching just the special ed children and the gen ed teacher teaching just the gen ed children. I know that there's a hope that the number of TAs that were proposed in the budget could staff in that way, but the schedule, as we know, is very complex. So what I'm hoping is that at some point we get a pledge from the board that it's not about the number of TAs, but rather if the master schedule comes back and says, 5's not going to cut it, you're going to need 6, that's what we're going to do to ensure the coverage that we know is working. That's it.
I think that the wind might be blowing on that microphone. I don't. Maybe just one window, yeah, okay.
Is that enough? Hi, I'm Ann Cunningham. I live at 6 Nichols Drive, and I want to piggyback on what Jen Destin said. I absolutely think, first of all, I want to just clarify that I really think that having the TAs in K through 4 is, it's also a gen ed issue. It's not just a special ed issue, and I just want to say that for the benefit of all the kids in the classroom, we need to know that the model that's working will continue to work for all of those kids. And those classrooms are so important and vital, and I just want to make sure that we prioritize them, because I am concerned that if we change the model without any kind of thought put into how it's actually going to work, that these kids are going to suffer. So I just wanted to piggyback on what Jen Destin said. I think it's really, really important. And thank you.
Any other public comment?
Doug, before we move on, I do want to make one announcement. We had announced that there was a finance committee meeting this Wednesday at 7:15, and did we change the time officially? Is everyone? Yeah. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that, but just I want to say that the finance committee meeting on Wednesday, where we will talk about our procurement processes, that is how we buy things, how we bid things, as well as the issue of tuition-free attendance for out-of-district teachers' children. We'll be discussing those two things, and that will happen at 5 o'clock now instead of 7:15.
A couple other items that are on.
And a couple other items.
We had like 5 more. But those two are on there, and my Lisa will be sending to Janine tomorrow the agenda, just so
Great.
people have
Thank
it. And there's always obviously other things can be brought up, but there's about there was a few more things that I.
Those aren't the only two financial issues going on.
No, there are, yeah, there's a couple, and hopefully there'll be easier things, but there's one on modified, so just a couple kind of things I just wanted to.
I just want to know something.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, with that, we'll keep moving along. There's an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So I want to move now and pass the meeting over to Principal A.D. Pietro and Ms. Bertacci, talk about the language program.
Good evening, everyone. Before we start with the language presentation, I do want to just update, I'll do it with Dr. Wilson and the board, that we have two high-profile positions that we're looking for at the high school, middle school. One is the band orchestra position that we had so many people come out for, and I wanted to give you an update on where we are in the progress of finding Ken Jernigan's replacement. We had two demo lessons last week, and we have another demo lesson scheduled for this week. So the pool of candidates was extraordinary. So we're pretty confident that we're going to send a couple of candidates to Dr. Wilson sometime either the end of this week or as soon as we get back from break, but we'd like to do it this week if we can get it done and have someone hired relatively soon. As far as the guidance position at the high school is concerned, we spent the last 3 days, we being Jeanette Coker, myself, and Jocelyn Perez from the middle school, screening candidates. We had over 250 applications for the position. We screened 43 people over 3 days. And, you know, we have narrowed the field down to about 9 candidates who we think are, if any of the 9 are hired, I think we're in great shape. So we're putting together a full committee interview with students and parents and teachers, and that'll happen as soon as we get back from the spring break. And then there's some other kinds of tasks we'd like that guidance person to do as well. And then we hope to get some candidates over to Dr. Wilson soon thereafter so that the board can act on that. To Dr. Wilson's point, we don't want to lose people, so we'd like to move it along as quickly as possible. But I did want to give you guys an update on where we stood on those 2 important positions.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we're excited. We're pleased with the level of candidate that applied for the position.
Lou, I'd like to, you remind me to thank you and all the principals for your involvement in recruitment this spring. You folks may or may not know that you spent an evening not too long ago at Dobbs Ferry at the Diversity Fair. Correct. And I also happen to know the principals have been scattered out everywhere, fanning out. You just did come back from a college or two.
Yeah, I was over at Lehman College for a day, and Tesfer was over at Manhattanville for a day. So we're trying to sort of expand our web a little bit. So we're doing a much better job of recruiting.
You're doing a good job, and it's good to see that there's an effort to reach out and get the best candidates available.
Well, thank you again. Does everyone have a copy of this handout? Okay, so the majority of this presentation is going to be done by the ladies to my left. I have with me Nora Bataki, who's the chair of the World Language Department, also a phenomenal French teacher. And next to her is Veronica Elenaire, who teaches French and Latin, so she is our Latin teacher. So to give you a little bit of background information, over the last probably 2 years, maybe a little bit more, we've had endless conversations, we being the World Language Department and myself, the administration, about the quality of the AP program as it pertains to language. And the revamping of the curriculum and the test that really didn't measure what we felt was what they should be measuring. We offer the AP Language and Culture course in both Spanish and French at Hastings High School. We would look at adding the Latin component in some fashion. So I've asked, basically what we did is I asked Ms. Bertaki to lead her team to look at other options that they think would best fit our needs at the high school. It took some time, and they'll explain that to you, but they've come back with a recommendation, albeit a little late in the game. We understand that, but we got caught up in some New York State school SUNY bureaucracy when it comes to who owns courses between Westchester Community College and SUNY Albany. So that delayed us a few months, and Nora can talk a little bit more about that. But I think we found the program that is through the State University at Albany, entitled the University in the High School Program, where our teachers would become adjunct professors for SUNY Albany, and we can offer college credit courses here at Hastings High School through SUNY Albany for French 4 and French 5, Spanish 4 and Spanish 5, and also Latin 4 and Latin 5, which gives opportunity for more students. It will also reduce the bear and stress of the AP exam, which really, in our opinion, didn't measure the proficiency of our students. But I want to give it justice and have Nora and Veronica really talk about their rationale for wanting to make this change. So Nora, Veronica.
Okay, thank you. Lou mentioned the delay that we had with the vetting process, the SUNY bureaucracy. Essentially, Westchester Community College had to release us to SUNY Albany. The SUNY rule states that you're supposed to go through the nearest SUNY school. We looked at Westchester Community College, and because it's a 2-year college, the courses were just not at the level that we needed. They don't offer French or Latin, and the Spanish was just not at the level that we require. So that took a little bit of time to get them. I think they dragged their feet a little bit. But at any rate, that did happen, and so we were able then to move forward with SUNY Albany. One of the things that really motivated us to do this was student feedback. Students have been increasingly, for the past few years, showing that they have a strong desire to continue with the world language at the upper levels, eventually continuing into college, but they just don't want to do another AP course. You know, they're feeling that AP overload. And so we really started to think very carefully about this. You know, is this really serving their needs? We have never been very happy with the testing format of the AP. It relies very heavily on multiple choice. The movement right now in the study of world languages is to use performance-based assessments that really are, include authentic tasks, and the multiple choice just doesn't do that. In addition, we have found that it has the AP exam has very unrealistic time constraints, that students are expected to do a lot of material very quickly, which really penalizes the student who works carefully and wants to check their work over, to make sure that they've done there is no time on the AP exam for that. And it also has such a specific format that we have to spend a lot of time training students in the format of the exam. And I had a student who did very well on the exam, who very aptly said, I feel that this exam is more about whether or not I know how to take this kind of an exam rather than what I can actually do with the French language. So for those reasons, we really thought that AP was just not what a good fit for us. The other thing we found is that fewer colleges and universities automatically grant credit for AP scores, even high scores. It's very, very negotiable, so a student pays to take the exam, and then they're often told, oh, you got a nice score, but we're not granting you credit for it. And I suspect a lot of that has to do with money. So what does the SUNY Albany program do for us? For one thing, it does allow us to give college-level credit-bearing courses. So upon successful completion of these courses, they don't just have perhaps the possibility of earning college credit. They do earn actual college credit through the university in the high school program of SUNY Albany. And this would apply to both our 11th and our 12th grade courses. AP is only in the 12th grade. This has a particular benefit for our Latin program because we've never offered AP or any kind of external assessment for Latin. And I'm going to invite now Veronica to tell you a little bit more about the Latin.
Good evening. So 6 years ago, we decided that the Latin program really needed an extension into an honors course, which has never been offered before. There was actually a lot of conversation with students, with alumni, and about their feedback, and that's when we decided that the AP format is not for our program. Again, for the very similar reasons that Nora mentioned, that the program and the format of the exams are more stress-inducing than actually quality-producing readers. So now it's going to be really an amazing opportunity for our Latin program, which is very steady, it seems, to offer the courses which are assessed on the outside of school, which receive the college credit both for 11th graders and for 12th graders, and which will still allow for the same depth and quality of the curriculum, the one that interests children, the one that really allows us to teach our Hastings students in the material that is interesting to them and is personable to them, and still maintain a very high quality course, which is going to be recognized by other universities.
So we're just going to wrap up. Okay. So again, we're looking, our goal was to find something that would give us flexibility, high level of, good rigor with flexibility. And the SUNY Albany program, in fact, will allow us to develop our own syllabus and assessments, which are reviewed and certified by SUNY professors to make sure that they're in keeping with their standards. SUNY also provides on-site visits by liaison professors, so they come and actually sit in on all of our classes early in the year. And, but looking at this program, we felt that we can offer culturally relevant curricula, promote communicative skills, and foster creativity. It's culturally we can offer culturally rich, linguistically rigorous, low-stress program for our students. So for us, it just seemed to be a win-win situation. It will require some work on our part, of course, because we will have to not totally reinvent the wheel, but we will have to, really look at our curriculum. What do we like? What are we going to change? But I think in the long run, this will really benefit our Hastings High School students.
And what's the cost?
There is no cost to the district, and students, I believe it's $160 for 3 college credits.
For $160 for 3 credits?
Yeah, and any student that has free or reduced lunch, I think they pay half.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's 2 points I do want to highlight. One is that these are we're going to own the courses. These are our courses that we get approved through SUNY Albany, and it's coursework and rigor that we value at our school. I think that's important. Our teachers will be approved as professors through Albany, but we own the course, and it is absolutely designed and delivered by our own teachers. I think that's important. The other thing is they're not 2 semesters and they're not 3 credits and 3 credits. It's full year for 3 credits. So the pacing is manageable, and it offers opportunities for our Latin program that we haven't had in the past. I've witnessed students walk out of that AP exam demoralized and quite upset because they walked in really knowing the language and walked out thinking they know nothing. So I think there is a cultural shift, and it's part of some of the challenge success work that we're doing. This fits right in.
Yeah.
We're reassessing our program, and by no means did challenge success drive any of this. But it pleases me as the principal of the school that other departments are thinking the same way that we're thinking as administrators, and that whatever we can do to still offer a rigorous curriculum to our students and really challenge our students, but yet do it the right way, I think is important. And for us to not look at those options, I think is a disservice to our community. So that's why we're doing this.
So Lou, I think this is great. I think this is a win-win. I think we've always had a lot of excellent language, an excellent language program in the high school, and in certain areas it's been really outstanding. And I think that the idea of not having kids taking yet another AP course and not the whole, as you called it, the AP overload, I think, I was thinking as they were talking, and you just said it, that this completely fits into the Project Challenge Success, and it gets kids learning for the sake of learning and knowing language and being tested on content. And the business in college is really about, it's about, at college it's about money and whether you're going to pay for credits and how they're going to make more money and what they're going to give you credit for. And even if they give you AP credit, they still say, kids can always opt out of language just by taking a language test at a college anyway, whether they have an AP in most colleges. So this seems to me like just a great no-brainer, obvious terrific.
I
Thank you
agree,
for all the
and
work.
Anecdotally, I can speak just from experience, and this is, again, anecdotally, and it's not research-based in any way, but many of the prestigious colleges accept colleges from state universities rather than taking them from private universities or AP. I can tell you from experience, my son is at Virginia Tech currently, and he took a calculus course at Westchester Community College. The community wanted to take it at Manhattan College, and Virginia Tech said, no, we're not going to grant you the credit from Manhattan College, but they accepted the Westchester Community College credit because it was a recognized state university, which to me said a lot. I think this will open up some more avenues for students to have some of their credits kind of transferred over, whether they be elective credits or not. It is about money.
Right, and they usually counted for elective credit, not to get out of required courses.
If you can knock out 6 credits of your elective, that's a half a year of half a semester of tuition. So I think it'll be an advantage for parents as well.
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
I have 2 questions. Is there another Westchester district that has charted this course before and has used SUNY Albany to provide?
Actually, one of the reasons we started looking into it, not a Westchester district, but Rockland County, Suffern. Stephen Lopez, who is our AP Spanish teacher, who came to us from Suffern, taught in this program in Suffern and was very pleased with it. So that was one of the reasons that we started looking at it, because he had actually worked within the program and had found it to be really beneficial.
My other question is, what type of impact will this have on the school report that's provided to colleges and universities to indicate that this is a more rigorous and appropriate course for...
That's the job of our guidance department when they put our profile together. It'll be listed similar to our Syracuse University course, our advanced geology to SUNY Oneonta. It would still be listed as a college course, and our guidance department will make that very, very clear to all of the college reps. So I don't think it'll hurt our kids at all. Okay.
Just some questions in terms of, so I guess one question about the college acceptance of the credit. It sounds like from your previous comment, you think this is going to be like for like in terms of across the broad spectrum.
Believe it or not, I believe it's going to be...
It's going to be better.
Better.
Better, okay.
Yeah. And understand, a student who doesn't want the credit doesn't need to take the credit. That's the optional piece.
Yes.
I mean, the course is the course.
So can you take the course without taking it for credit?
Yes.
Yeah. So that actually dovetails with my second question, which is, will this be an open enrollment course?
Yes.
Or okay, so it is an open enrollment course? Okay.
Well, yes and no. Okay, let me
Well, what is that?
So you can't go from Spanish 2 to Spanish 5, but...
if you meet the prereqs...
Correct.
If
you're in Spanish 4 and you want to take the next level of Spanish, it's completely open enrollment.
Okay. And then, with the AP model, typically it's a 4 or a 5 is required for college credit.
Yeah.
What analogy will exist in terms of how do you need to perform in order to get earned college credit?
I don't have that. There are many colleges that even a 5 they don't accept. As far as AP is concerned, I can almost guarantee a 3 or below is not accepted, but a 4 and 5 is usually the standard, more like a 5. I can't tell you what it's going to look like with the SUNY Albany, because it'll be letter grades through SUNY Albany. So I would assume an A or a B would be an A definitely, and maybe a B or B plus will be accepted. Same kind of standard. Some colleges don't even look at the grade. They just want to see that it's a college level course and it's through a state system, and they transfer the elective credits, to Jody's point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say, I think this is great, and I thank you guys for putting in the effort to find this and try to address this problem. I recall as the AP was changing, speaking to Marilyn DeRubase, who was very upset about it. And she just said it's really going in a bad direction. It was much less language-oriented. So there are just a couple of points, that all of which are very positive. I think that by doing this, you're probably going to have more students continue on with Spanish, which is wonderful, and supports our board goal of diversity, because the more fluent we are in other languages, the more accessible we are to other people. So I think that's great. The College Board is a questionable institution at this point. We've all read the papers. Their proctoring is questionable. But even beyond that, there was a change made in the payment of APs, where you now, my understanding is you have to pay in the fall for your AP. And if you don't take it, and it's about like 80, 90 bucks. If you don't take it, the College Board still keeps 40 or so. And there's no reason for that. So to not support them, I
That
think...
change was made this year.
Yeah.
We used to do AP registration in the spring. It's now done in the fall and has to be done by October 30th.
Yeah, so they're keeping their money. So I think to not support that is a good thing. And then as to what we're talking about in terms of college credit for the AP, I can speak of my own daughter who went to, a high-level institution, and for all her other 5s on APs, she got credit. For her 5 on the Spanish AP, not only did she not get credit, but she didn't even place out of Spanish. So I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think colleges are looking so fondly at even, a 5 on a Spanish AP. So this sounds like it gives our students more opportunity to get the college credit.
I agree, and I think the entire College Board AP program is at a crossroads. For example, they just changed AP Biology 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, changed the entire format of AP Biology, and now they're changing it again next year, and they're taking the entire human body out of AP Biology.
Yeah, why would you want to study
I don't know
that?
how we have a discussion about biology and not include the human body, but the human body's out of the curriculum for AP Biology.
Why would you want to study the human body in biology?
These are the shifts that are happening at the College Board. I'm not going to throw the entire AP program under the bus. I think there's real relevant, rigorous curriculum. I think we have to look at each individual course and make decisions, but find good alternatives if we're going to go away from that. Just so you know how much we value the world languages. Both the ladies here to my left were working at Dobbs Ferry at one point, and we grabbed them because they felt that we value this is again not a knock to Dobbs Ferry, but that we value the world languages. We really value it, and that was one of the reasons why they came here, and I don't think they've been disappointed.
Just a couple of quick questions on logistics from a timing perspective. Is it next school year or the following school year?
I will admit that we assumed, I know it's dangerous, and Dr. Wilson knows this, but we kind of assumed that you guys were going to approve this at some point. So this is for September. And it's been put into our course catalog, and we are scheduling students for it. If you said no, we can easily change it to AP, but right now it's yes for September.
So, and then to follow up on the, Nora,
Can I just make a point to that?
Oh yeah, please.
Because I was surprised when I saw it on the agenda, because I didn't know anything about it until this week. So I thought there'd be some discussion about it before you put it in for September. So from a process standpoint,
we had anticipated on making this presentation a lot earlier, but because of we call it bureaucracy, but because it took so long to get Westchester Community College to release us to SUNY Albany, we didn't get that clearance until the end of almost middle of March, right? Early March. We didn't get that clearance, so we didn't know if it was a possibility moving forward at all. So to present it when we didn't know if we were going to actually have the time to move it forward was the reason why we didn't install. As a matter of fact, Dr. Wilson said the same thing. I don't know anything about it. We purposefully didn't do that because we didn't think we were going to get to the point we are today because everyone was stalling us. And we would call the provost, and the provost would change us to send us to someone else until they approved us as being a satellite of their program. We couldn't move forward, and that was one of the reasons.
because I would have liked a little bit more time to just think about different sides, because it does put the board in a weird spot, because now students are anticipated for September, right?
Yes and no. We're talking about a manageable number of students. Should the board have said no, and they can still say that, it's easy to go back and institute. We haven't dropped the AP course. The AP course is still there. We just haven't scheduled anybody for that course at this point.
I have a couple questions, but I'll let you go first.
And French 4 and Latin 4 and Spanish 4 are courses that we have already designed. It's just a matter of whether we're going to assign UAlbany credit to it or not. The course has already been developed.
So that gets to one of them. I'm just, Nora, you referred to the zero cost, and I'm just wondering, curriculum writing or PD, you mentioned that...
maybe some summer work.
Okay.
Which is normal course of action. If we have a new course that we propose for September, we usually put in for some summer work.
And the accreditation of the teachers through the SUNY system,
Goes
is
right
that...
through the SUNY system. There's no cost to that.
There's no cost to that? Okay.
We just have to send in, they ask us for our resumes and also for our transcripts. And then it goes to the different departments, the French, the Spanish, the Latin department, and they evaluate.
So it's not coursework or stuff on your part, it's just,
They don't want us to do any coursework
Great.
until they've cleared our credentials.
and when that does come up, is that stuff you've got to travel? Is that a cost? Is that a PD? No, okay.
Send it.
We do the syllabus.
That's it,
The next
okay.
step is to write up the syllabus.
So just to end, I will say that I really like the passion, the fact that you've been thinking about this for many years, and you've got someone in-house that's got experience with it. It sounds like, well thought out.
Just a couple questions. I know you mentioned that students are excited. Have you heard back from the parents much? Have you talked to them?
I presented it at the last parent liaison meeting, just as something that we're going to come talk to the board about. There was really no reaction, I have to be honest with you. Most parents didn't really say much. There wasn't a reaction positively or negatively. Many students don't really, I have to be honest, many students don't even know that the change is happening. To say that students are excited by it, I don't think that's the case. I just think that when we went through scheduling, we offered this as an option. That was it. But we really haven't had many discussions with, I can't speak for what the ladies have had it in their classes, but as far as a school, we haven't had a huge discussion over it, no.
Yeah. And then I know you guys have talked about colleges not giving college credit, but in the admissions process, does it make a difference if there's an AP class versus this class?
For the AP class, the current AP class, I would say minimal, in that we're still going to offer a college-based alternative to AP, similar to we offer the Syracuse University courses as alternatives to AP in U.S. history, AP in English, English language and English lit. And those courses are seen as rigorous courses. This will be another dual enrollment course, college course within a high school. I don't see that as being an issue.
Can I
Jeremy,
piggyback you a little bit here, which is...
but I can't, just one second, to sit here and say absolutely,
I
I'd
can.
be lying to you.
I chair a college admissions committee, and APs certainly are taken into account, but also if you take courses or have credit in college courses, that's sort of, I don't want to say it's equal, but it's equally taken into account. I don't think it discredits someone.
And colleges will know that this is the highest level of course that we offer.
In fact, I was just going to follow up on what Lou said. What the colleges do, at the elite college level, they look at what your school offers, and they look at what you have taken as a student. So if the highest level of Spanish you can take is this, then they'll check that box that this student is taking a rigorous schedule.
And I would just say, and I would just add that I think within this community, my understanding is that, to the extent that the super classes in history and English wind up being analogous, they're well received and well understood among the parent community as being significantly rigorous classes, materially rigorous classes in the high school. So to the extent that this is going to fall within that same cohort, this is, I think, going to be well received by parents.
And to that point, I think you haven't gotten to this experience yet, but the problem with AP courses that people will talk about, kids will talk about, is about breadth and depth, that they have to cover so much because they have to cover so much for the exam and there's no depth. And I think kids really, and teachers, experiences that it's really not the way you want to be teaching and it's not really the way you want to learn. So that's one of the real deficits of AP. It looks great. I took 6 AP courses. Sometimes colleges actually look negatively when kids start having like I've seen transcripts with kids where they're taking 5 or 6 AP courses in a year, and I kind of feel like...
So if, maybe you cover this, but if a kid wants to take an AP course or an AP test, can they still do that in Hastings?
Yeah. The rules are anyone can take an AP exam. There's no course requirement that's actually sitting for an AP exam. So if at the end of the French 5 class, in May, that child wants to sit for the AP French exam or AP Spanish exam, they just have to let us know in advance so we can order them the exam, and we'll absolutely proctor that exam. We have students who take music theory APs. We have micro and macroeconomics. These are not courses that we offer at the high school, but every year we have a few students who take those AP exams.
And for
It's a
example,
good question,
Scarsdale got
Jeremy.
rid of their entire AP curriculum. They offer AT, Advanced Topics, because they felt that the AP curriculum was not as rigorous as what they would offer. But those children routinely take
Yeah.
the AP anyway.
And I don't want the board to think that this is the beginning of some sort of a coup against AP. We're not looking at eliminating the AP program from Hastings High School. I just think in world languages, the AP is not up to par with what we think the value of world languages and what the rigor of that course should be like, and it should be performance-based rather than how you can test. So I think that's the reason. In no way are we looking to eliminate AP courses from all of our program of studies at Hastings High School. So I definitely don't want to give the board that impression as well.
Other questions. Do you think that, timing-wise, is this something you have to put in place soon to make it happen for September? Because my question is, when we have this assistant super of curriculum coming in, is that something that they should weigh in on? I know you guys have done 2 years' worth of work, and also, a lot of things that we talk about, we kind of bat around for hours and hours. And here we're like, well, we haven't gotten any feedback from parents, but I think they'll be good with it. Is it something that we should get some feedback from? I know we got one.
I can answer that. Yeah, I can answer that in a couple of ways. Whether the assistant superintendent, I think the assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction absolutely should have a say in it. The question is, should we be doing this now? Yes. We actually want to do something like this for 2 years. So to delay it another year, I would say we're just putting another Band-Aid on something that we're unhappy with. It's the board's prerogative to push it back, to wait. If we did that, we can change things up tomorrow morning, and the course selection process can look completely different, and we'll make all of those adjustments, and things will be as smooth as they were today. So that's not an issue. That's more of a question of whether the board would like us to do that, and that's fine. But absolutely, if we had an assistant superintendent of curriculum in place now, it would be absolutely something we run by them.
Is this something that's sort of like, in work we call it a two-way door, where if we do it, we're not really happy with it in a year or two, we can always go easily shift back?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're not signing any commitment for 10 years or anything like that. This is going to be fluid. I think the most important piece is this is our course. And I don't think we'd be unhappy with something that we've created. It's not something that SUNY Albany's pushing down our throat. Similar to Dan Brownstein's advanced geology class. It's his course, it's his class. It's super rigorous. Anybody who's ever been in advanced geology, just come by my office in early January and you'll see the kids crying in the corner, almost to a fault.
I can personally attest as a parent of 2 students of that class.
But students who leave that course, at the end when it's all done and all the stress has been kind of put away, it's a life-changing experience for many kids. And if you have the luxury of going on one of his trips, you come back a different person.
And Jeremy, I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think why each of the board members, I am assuming, are in support of this. I think it's because you have to think about what's the purpose of teaching language and how kids learn a second language. And everything that the 2 ladies and Lou are talking about is exactly how research shows that children learn language in the best way. So when you think about the cultural aspect of it, the cultural competency, and really immersing children in language and in activities that are real world and are going to prepare them to be multicultural citizens. That's exactly what we're talking about with this, where the AP sort of goes against all of those things that you're trying to teach when you're trying to teach a second language. So, as someone who studies how children learn language, like everything that they're saying, it's sort of checking every single box with what's the best practice for kids.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say that it's a great pleasure to hear from you that it's a win-win situation, but in my opinion, it's more than win-win, because for us, it's obvious. We hope to share this view with everybody. For the children who are already, who would have an opportunity to have an AP exam, let's say French 5 and Spanish 5, well, the switch for them is only for the best. But don't forget that it's also, this change is going to bring us 4 more classes, which are going to be earning the college credit, which don't now. It's going to be Spanish 4, which is a very rigorous course, French 4, which is a fluent, kids call it social studies and French course, but that I think speaks for itself. And also, I mean, I understand I am speaking for my program here, but I am proud of it, and I think that our children are amazing, and they have proven it in different ways. And now to receive the college credit for the hard work that they're doing, I think it's a very, very important point to consider.
And it is rigorous. Our program is rigorous. And even speaking to Spanish 4, as a bilingual person, I took Spanish 4 and struggled. So I think it's working to continue building that rigor, but making it more applicable to why they're studying languages. Like, this seems like it's getting them ready for a real bilingual or trilingual world, as opposed to learning the mechanics of how you're taking tests. And we see that as young as our third graders. Like, they grapple with, how do I take a test? How do I, handle the mechanics of this state-driven test? And that's what it seems like with the AP as well. So if we could have control over any part of that to make it best practice for kids, I think it's something that we should all get behind.
And just to clarify what Veronica, one second, Ann, I'm sorry. What Veronica was talking about, we currently teach a Spanish 4 honors level course, a French 4 honors level course, and a Latin 4 honors level course. Those three courses exist now. They're not tied to any college credit. They're not AP. What we'd be talking about as far as AP is concerned only affects level 5 Spanish and level 5 French.
And there is no current
There is no
AP Latin, correct?
Correct, there's no AP in Latin currently. I'm sorry, Ann.
No, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the,
Oh, she knows.
what's, Jerry, do you have any more questions? No? Okay. What's the review cycle by which SUNY comes through to make sure that they continue to...
information. I don't know.
Well, I think it was here, no?
For the first step is that we have to submit a syllabus.
Yep.
That is reviewed, approved, or,
Right.
sent back to us for modification.
Right.
Once it's approved, then we start teaching the class.
Right.
And then early in the fall, they will send a liaison professor in to each of our courses to sit in and make sure that it is being taught in the way that they expect it to be.
And do they then have, biannual follow-up or...
Yeah, I don't remember what, yes, they do.
Yeah, they must, right? They need to...
Every so many years. I
Right.
think it's like every 3 years. Something.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure about the exact number of years, but yes, there is a follow-up periodically every few years.
That would be my one, that
Yeah.
just that I have no doubt that the rigor initially stays high, but that there's a mechanism by which the rigor is maintained, even if that's much to the chagrin of students taking the course, right? Because the one thing the AP does is it gives you feedback via that test. If you're not having students take the test, that's some level of feedback, or if you're having students take the feedback and they're not getting the scores that you expect of your district, that's also feedback. So that's the one area where I would be interested in just knowing long-term that there's not some kind of dilution that occurs over the passage of time, that an A in 2020 doesn't mean the same thing as an A in 2025.
And even I would sort of disagree with you on that, just because the AP doesn't necessarily test as much content in Spanish language as opposed to really the mechanics of the test based on it. So there's an argument for that as well.
But that speaks to the issues that exist with the AP and the testing mechanism. But it's just it does have, for all of the faults or flaws of AP, and this is not just AP with world language, but AP generally, it does have an inherent checks and balances system and data that fast forward, you have an assistant superintendent of CNI that has data to work off of, and that's really, I would just ask, not that you were expecting, or anyone on the board are expecting a concrete answer to this today, but something to keep in mind that, for your future selves are able to comment or point to the ongoing rigor.
I just want to remind the board, remember last year you guys approved us being able to offer the seal of biliteracy to students. And last year we had, I believe, 9 students. This year we have 7. We have 6 students who are going to prove their mastery to us in Spanish and English, and 1 in French and English. 5 and 2. Okay, I'm close. But that's how much we value world language.
Yeah.
You know, and our students really value that. So I'm not looking to water down
Of course.
language
No, of course.
at all.
Of course.
Just to reduce some of the anxiety that's associated with the AP test.
Yeah, listen, I will say
Where's the
this,
next
just
step
my
goes?
final comment, then I'm going to stop on this. I do think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And I think if it results in more meaningful penetration of the language rather than test taking, but true fluency and true sort of full full absorption, it's huge. I would aspire, I would be thrilled if both of my children wound up in that. As somebody that took AP French and cannot, and took the test and cannot speak a lick of French, I would be thrilled if my children had a more meaningful, real language experience. So without, and I don't feel like I have full information. I think that that's the point that you're making, and I appreciate the point that you're coming from. The sense that I get here is that this is really an attempt to accomplish what I just described, and good on you. So.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say, Doug, I feel kind of the way Tim does, and I have to say I had withheld my approval, if you like, my recommendation, because I did have some concerns, but they've all been answered tonight in what I've heard. So more specifically, I like this idea that students still have the option to take the AP, and apparently it'd be quite easy for them to do that, notwithstanding what course they were, or affiliation they had college-wise. I like the fact that there is no, pardon the expression, master plan to dismantle AP, because I think, and as I've heard you say as well, Lou, AP varies. It's not a monolith, and some of the programs are excellent.
Correct.
So it's good that you have that
Agreed.
attitude, and it would not just, like cutting down trees in the forest. You would be very, careful in your proceeding and making sure that it is, of course, in the best interest. And also, you said another thing I liked, which is simply that if things should not work out, you always have the option to go back to AP. So those were my only concerns, and I think you've answered them very well. And I would say, on that basis, I have no reluctance to recommend this to the board, whether you want to approve it now or at a future date. But I think that I see some good feeling around the table that should be acknowledged that this is a good idea.
So I can share that I'm comfortable approving it now, especially because I think, Jeremy, what you brought up with the two-way door, that was a big concern. Can we walk back? We're making a big investment, in time or money. Doesn't seem like that's the case. There's a lot of energy behind it and a lot of passion. So I would personally feel comfortable approving it tonight. I don't know what the other board members feel.
I would second that.
I agree. I think that's great.
And I promise the board that we will be looking at this very, 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 very closely. Make sure it'll align. It'll align to make sure it's the right thing for kids.
Well done.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have to
we need
formally
to
vote
vote?
on that?
Kaylin gets there.
I guess we don't have to
I think we
officially
do.
vote now.
No?
I'm getting it.
No? Okay.
I was going to say, Jeremy, you could abstain from a vote.
I'm not against it.
No, I thought your questions were very good.
I just would
We
love
don't have to vote.
I thought your questions
To
were
be honest,
good.
And I was just saying, Lou, I'm not against it. I didn't want you to take my... But
Okay,
I
Maureen,
will
do
say...
you want to get the budget stuff?
Yeah?
I will say, just to make a... We're kind of...
Okay.
Are we taking a break? No, we're not.
We're not taking a break. We're trying to get through the budget.
I will say that, for me personally, it's helpful to have more time.
Yeah, and some people are trying to get to a basketball game, which will be hard tonight.
Some people want to get home and watch basketball.
Some people want to get home and watch basketball.
Because you wind up in a situation where you feel like...
I won the Lipton family pool.
Yeah, you kinda-
Shows you your
There you
inverse
go.
relationship between basketball knowledge and winning the pool.
What team is
Well,
tonight?
this year was not based on Rex over.
Maybe it's just the, I thought someone said that there's a Hastings game, but there's just the, is the there must be a game here. Someone just said, I need to get to the basketball game.
It's a 9:30 start.
I guess we start.
What game? Because that's the it's not the final. What game?
I think she just has it as a PDF.
It's not the final, is it? Oh, it is the final game tonight?
I'll log in tonight.
It's Texas Tech, Virginia tonight?
Hey, Lou, can we ask
So
one
there
more
you go.
question?
It is time.
Janine was just saying that.
Guys, come on.
I didn't know that. Come on, man.
One question. Apparently, we would need to approve the textbook.
I don't think there's a textbook change, but I'll double check that. I don't think it has anything to do with textbook. I don't even think we have a textbook for level 4, to be honest with you. It's all, because it's all conversation and culture.
No, but it's not.
They don't have a proposal.
Not of course, but the board does not approve textbooks.
There's no proposal.
Just PDF.
So that's the
I'll
only
double
thing the board
check.
has to do
Okay?
for any enforcement.
Here, can
want
you
me
post
to-
something to the, right now? If
Do you want me to
send you
email it
something?
to you?
I'm looking for it.
I was just pulling it up. I can,
Where is it? I'm sorry. Maybe take it off, sorry, right here. I know, well, that's.
Maureen, it's being photographed. Can we,
Yeah, but
Patrick,
you
can
wanna
we
take
not,
your
can
emails
we not
off? Forget
photograph
it.
Maureen's emails?
I'm not on one of these now.
No,
I went into
Maureen's
it,
email.
forget it, I shut it down.
Oh, thank you, okay.
Do you want me to go get the drive? I have it on a drive too.
Whatever, let's just do
We are
it.
taking-
I was trying to hurry up and do it, but.
Why don't we start talking about it?
I'm gonna, do you want me to just
It's
forward
on my
it to you?
desktop, it's Patrick's.
Why don't you let her get the thing, we can do some other part
Because
of
the
the
attachment
agenda.
that was on the board docs is not, it's cutting
Well,
off or
here,
something.
people here to talk
Well,
about it.
is this how it was downloaded, you mean, with the attachment?
The attachment for the staffing, P6.
I can go get, I have it on a flash drive.
Let her get the flash drive, why don't we vote on some other things?
Hold on.
Move through
I
this.
just emailed it to you.
I can't open.
Yeah, but she
it.
can't open her email.
As soon
It all
as I
comes up
opened my
on
email, there were
screen.
like things that were popping
Well, we
up.
all have it on our computers.
Okay, so let's just talk about it. I have
Let's just talk
copies
about
Do you
it.
guys have your laptops here? Because you can pull it up. It's in the
You
public.
know what I have? I actually make copies.
Oh, great, so we
Just
can
in
hand it
case.
out to the people who are here?
Yep.
Thank you. They just, Maureen can't access this document to put it up there. I know, I wish I wanted to.
No, we had it in Word docs before. It's just not
formatted
there.
as one page.
No, but it's
Yeah.
cut off. It's cut off. It's cut off on the screen for some.
What is Word docs? It says tab.
I think he's saying that there's more to it.
But
See,
let's
this
make
is
sure
supposed
we
to
have-
attach, you see, this is not supposed to attach to here. That's supposed to attach to the second column. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so this shows us all. Although actually, I think we're going to,
Because I'm not sure what the board has.
Because it's supposed to show kindergarten this year and then kindergarten projected.
Do you have this, like this?
We could share one if you need.
Just make sure, does it have like the both? Because it may just be cutting off.
It's cutting off, but if you scroll down.
Okay.
I'll PDF it and send it to the board right now,
Oh, thanks.
if I can get to it.
Oh, maybe I have, yeah, thank you.
I have it on my phone.
As a PDF or as the
As an
Excel?
Does anybody else need this?
The problem is people are struggling with that.
Yeah, I know. Okay, does anybody else need a copy there?
I have it.
Sure. You have it? Okay.
Thank you.
It's really small. It's gonna give me a headache.
I know, I said it's too small
I
to
can't
read.
look at small stuff in my concussion like that. Still.
So,
And if we're going to talk about the budget, I do think it's worth clarifying, because we did get a letter today asking about the budget about Spanish and whether we're preserving the Spanish teacher position at Hillside. And the answer, hooray, is yes. So I just wanted to make sure people know that.
and just for everyone, we'll be putting up, I think after tonight, just the budget, like the full budget document, so people can have it. It's just that because the board had been, there were just a couple open items, but we'll have that up tomorrow morning, like under a tab on our homepage, so people can look through some of it. So I don't know, Lauren, if you wanted to speak, I mean, I could speak to it because you, okay. Okay. So this was Lauren's idea to put it together in this fashion, which I do think is helpful as we just look at the staffing and what currently exists in terms of the teacher assistants and what currently exists in the budget as being proposed for next year. And I think we've heard, and there's a concern right now without having the master schedule done, that we can't 100% guarantee that every content area, like there, just until we have all the specials laid out in all the classrooms, that there was a concern that we always knew that math and ELA would be fully covered in each classroom, but if they're as of right now, the leadership of the building doesn't feel comfortable guaranteeing that we'll have the same individual in a classroom, or not even the same individual, but that during science and social studies that we can also 100% guarantee that all of those times that those things were being taught, that there would be a teacher assistant in the classroom. But I think just in terms of I just wanted to just remind people of how we ended up with kind of what we're looking at. And it started with the idea that we, wanted to expand the ICT classrooms, and then in the attempt to try to make kind of everything work within the budget, we came up with a proposal with the fact that there would be less students in each ICT classroom to see if we could do a better job in just being more efficient with our scheduling of teacher assistants. We do still think that there's a real value in looking at it in this way, but again, I think people understand that, but it is true that without having done the full schedule right now, we can't guarantee, I know the board was just kind of concerned in how that's going to look. I think what we had spoken about is that we feel that we don't necessarily need the teacher assistants as they currently are to go to all the specials, and in many classrooms that may not be necessary. And so we were kind of proposing this mixed model. So in terms of our budget, what our current budget includes is we have budgeted 13 teacher assistants for next year. And as you can see in the attached chart, you can kind of get a sense of how that, how we took that staffing and how that's distributed across the board, where we have 2 full-time teacher assistants scheduled for the 2 ICT classrooms in kindergarten. And then the 1st through 4th grade level, we're assuming that we would need about a 0.6. And kind of how that looks is that obviously there'd be, again, this is with the scheduling, but we think that that's what would be needed to support making sure that the content areas were covered. But again, without having a master schedule done, there may be some snafus in trying to make that happen. And then at the middle school, right now proposed is because currently there's one of the ICT classrooms only has a half a day teacher assistant. So the recommendation last year, again, a little bit of a different schedule, would be that there'd be a shared kind of ICT teacher assistant there, which is similar to the others, but instead of being a 0.6, because the content time at the middle school is slightly different, the minutes of contact at the 5th grade level is a different number than the K through 4 number, so that we feel that that's why we're showing a 0.5 here, not the 0.6. And then if you look down, we also are projected to have two communications classes, each which would have a full-time teacher assistant, as well as a special class at Hillside that currently exists, as well as the middle school, and they would also still have their 1 TA assigned to that class. That there's no change in the staffing there. So where that leads us in the budget is that we currently would need to either have some type of line item to acknowledge that if this schedule couldn't work out, we may need right now we would need 3 to have the exact same model that we currently have. We would need 3 more teacher assistants budgeted into this budget. Or I mean, it could be a possibility that may not require that much. It could be another individual. It may not be 3, because I think the main concern was to ensure that there would be teacher assistants to help with the model that currently exists to deliver in that small group instruction model. So that's kind of where we're at. But I know Lauren, in one of the communications, and I figured we'd have the conversation tonight. There was at one point a small amount of contingency in the budget that we had started in our budgeting process just for the things that occur every year. And as from where we started in the budget process to where we are now, some of those items have already been used for other things. So as an example, we had three things in the past, not even maybe month and a half, that we already made the adjustment this year. So we're hiring a 0.4. You'll do that at the next meeting. Another 0.4 E&L teacher that was required for just, to meet some students' needs. We've actually just needed to hire 2 full-time teacher aides, 1-to-1 aides for this current school year of children that now are required to meet their needs. They're going to need that. And then we also there was one other one. Oh, and then we've discovered in our budgeting process that I think we needed another 0.2 of the reading specialist increase at the middle school that at first we were trying to kind of work within the staffing that we currently have. So That being said, just to kind of clear where the board is in terms of whatever, we had some contingency, but those 4 things, well, it's 5, oh, no, 4 things, already have eaten into that. We have not made a budget adjustment. I didn't come back because I basically acknowledged that I built in that cost next year. So any like wiggle room in some of those, and there's a slight amount, but again, there are still some unknowns until all of, end of year meetings are completed and where we end up in total staffing needs. So I guess what I was going to, I didn't know if the board wanted to consider, is there a scenario in which you want to build in either 1 or 2 additional spots or at least 1 additional amount of contingency out of the 250,000 you have under the cap, to like in the event that we would not be able to accomplish having all the teachers' assistants available during the small group instruction, that will give you the flexibility, and then having an additional person.
Question for you. I think it's hard to discuss one item without knowing what the trade-offs are.
Sure.
So what would the other, because I know the board was very hesitant to take up more, to spend more of that money. So what are the other things that money could be spent on?
You mean currently what, in terms of what hasn't been funded, or just in?
I don't know.
I mean, the only one other item that I would say has not been planned for in the budget. I think right now we have everything we've been discussing is covered for in the budget. There is no change. You've been able to restore the FLES position, the music. We're able to handle some of those unexpected, some of those things that have come through in the last few months within having a little bit of a small amount of contingency, that we were able to handle some of those additional staff members that were needed based on student needs. But in terms of the only one of the items, which wasn't really even part of the budget proposal, but we had spoken about, was if we ended up needing another section at Hillside for some reason.
Actually, can I ask?
Yeah.
I have a question, and I don't know if we want to stay on this, but as I look at the numbers of students in the grade, I have something to discuss in terms of adding another section. Do you want me to go there now, or do you want to have this discussion?
And I mean, I think the one thing that we've talked about with it, you can certainly talk about it, and it's actually not built into the budget at all, that section. I think the other piece that has been really problematic even in having that discussion is the space issue at Hillside. So that's, I'm sorry.
I'll tell you what I was
sure.
looking at. I mean, so we can talk about it all at once. So I appreciate that when you gave us the listing of the grades, you gave us how many students are in each grade. So for next year, as in this year, we're proposing 6 sections per grade. But when I looked at the numbers for next year's second grade, we anticipate 114 students, 6 sections. That would be an average of 19 children per section. Next year's fourth grade is 148 students, which is a difference of 34 students over the second grade. Same 6 sections, that would give them an average of 24.6 students. Now, they've been suffering in overcrowded situations this year, so I asked myself, where's the equity in that situation? So I wondered, what if we increased fourth grade to 7 sections and decreased second grade to 5 sections, and the numbers actually look attractive. So if you do that, next year's second grade then would have an average class size of 22.8, and next year's fourth grade, rather than being 24.6, would be 21. So I thought that that's something worth us discussing, because those children have been suffering. I know the younger children, we want to have smaller classes. Second grade is getting a little older, but at the same time, there's no perfect solution here, but we do have one grade that's kind of, took on the burden this year, and it looks like it's apparently going to get worse next year. So I think it's something for the board to thoughtfully consider. And it doesn't change the cost of the space
absolutely.
issue.
And actually, when we did do the analysis at different points with these sections, we did look at that just in terms of for both space and for enrollment purposes, because both of them are kind of rubbing up against each other. So not only were we considering the costs associated with splitting the fourth grade section, the concern over the space. I mean, the one piece that we don't have 100% clarity on is what the the incoming kindergarten will look like.
We're predicting 6 sections.
We are
as of
predicting
now.
it. So again, that was another area that, to your point, Lisa, if we found that number to be lower, that would offer the opportunity to also split the fourth grade, because right now you do have that additional section built in. I don't believe we would ever need more than 6 sections. So I think in looking at the enrollment, again, we've seen where some years it comes to fruition where it's been at 115 other times. So obviously that would be something that, as we talk about the budget, if the board said, if the number doesn't go beyond this, then we would like to use that
But even
position
aside
to
from that, even
split
if
the
kindergarten
section.
comes in at 6, this is still a change you could do that doesn't impact space or money.
Oh,
Instead of a
absolutely.
6 and 6, it's a 5 and 7.
No, I meant you kind of have two options. That's
Oh,
what I
so
just was
yeah.
highlighting, like you kind of have the both. So I think if in fact I guess if the sixth grade, the kindergarten didn't need the sixth section, then you could very easily do it. And then if not, you always have the it doesn't have to be the second option, or the same option to what you suggested, because we definitely, when we look through the budget, when we were looking at sections, what we needed for next year, we did look at that just in terms of the overall, trying to weigh it against the fourth grade, right? Because that was.
Number of kids in third grade?
Currently or next year? Jody?
What is it?
130. So they need the
It's
six.
really just between those two grade levels. The one is a little bit on the lower side, and then the other one is at the higher end. So I would agree. I mean, looking at that, if you were to kind of split them the other way, it would, the numbers would definitely on both ends not be above like that 24. So that's one of the areas. So that's obviously not budgetary, but that is a discussion point. Again, I just didn't want to lose sight because I know there was some concern about, we've been watching that particular cohort and seeing the growth there. And I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of that. But I think other than that, to your point, we do have the ability to do that if that were to be the decision, and that would be cost neutral. And it would also be space neutral, which is also very important right now.
No,
as we
that's
look
critical.
at the space.
It's
Yeah,
critical.
and especially as we were talking about scheduling, how the space, having that also comes into play with scheduling. Like if we had to share classrooms amongst teachers, then that impacts the ability then to share staff. So they're like all intertwined right now. So that's kind of where we are.
Is the question where it sounds like the question on the table is, do we add in a contingency hire, not knowing where that person would be, whether it's, we look at the way that the teaching assistant, the scheduling stuff works out, and is that optimal when the schedule comes in, or is it another section of kindergarten, or is it, there's a few different places that.
Well, we have I feel like right now we have this section of kindergarten at 6. So to Lisa's point, I mean, the idea would be that you do have some flexibility if you needed to break the fourth grade within the current existing structure of sections. So I guess what I just wanted to, make sure as we look at this, if it were to be something where we felt comfortable, if we needed one extra teacher assistant, then maybe we could somehow handle that with like a little bit of the wiggle room we have in some, but if we ended up needing to hire 2 or 3, then I get a little concerned, because as we've been going through this process with the budget and things that have occurred this year, which are not budget, like they're not budget requests, they're just, you have to do it.
So when would we have a clear understanding of how many more we actually need?
I would say that if we were to staff at the exact same level as today,
Right, 'cause I mean, I
3,
think that's
it would be 3.
That's the ideal, and I think that's what we know is what's best for kids, so that's what we want
So-
to do. So we're sure that 3 is that number, because it went from
Yes.
3 to 1. So how would
No,
that
the only reason I meant that if we were doing like the full model we have currently, it would require 3, because that would just remain in the teacher assistant would be assigned to the classroom. If we were to do it from a standpoint of, as long as the content areas are covered, that may require just a little less staff.
These content areas, are you like
Social
math
studies, yeah.
and
Mhm,
social
correct.
studies and science?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so that would require how many?
That, again, not knowing without a master scheduler, it may not require the full extra 3, it may require like 1 more. I'm now just guessing based upon not knowing how the schedule would be. Well, the scheduled person won't come till August, so I think that's the problem with looking at.
What's our gut on what we think? Is this a problem or not a problem? Because I have a few thoughts. One is...
Well, it is a problem, because...
No, the question, I think it's unknown whether the aides can or can't
I think
cover it.
if you look at the minutes, I guess when you look at the
understand?
minutes, when you think about the actual time a .6 teacher assistant is, it would, from a minute standpoint, work, but it has to do with the schedule. So I had explained, the teachers have roughly, they can go up to 283 minutes at Hillside, but I think with the common planning time, they're at 260 minutes per day, contact time with the students. The aides and assistants actually work a 7.5 to 8 hour workday of contact time with students. So currently, a few, 3 of those hours are for unrelated additional beyond content area in the classroom. They're also being used for a variety of things, correct? And they're enhancing that. But I think the idea is, if you just look at it from when you look at the amount of minutes, again, it's not a perfect science, but that there's a level of confidence that we feel we can make it work. Maybe it may require like one extra person to kind of fill in gaps and make sure we're not doing a piecemeal, that there's there's consistency also amongst,
Whether they're going to, because I know I had asked you, can we pull them from doing lunch and recess and do like lunch monitors or things like that? Is that taken into account in this plan?
Yes.
So they will not be doing lunch.
Well, they maybe do some, it may just not be, they may not be able to do the entire time of, if they're currently used for an hour, it may mean scaling back a half hour.
Just from a budgetary standpoint, it may be more to our advantage to hire more lunch monitors.
Exactly,
at, whatever that rate is, which isn't as much as a teacher's.
Correct.
Because if you think about where you want to utilize those people, you want them face-to-face with children during academic times.
Absolutely.
So I think we're having a couple of different conversations, but we haven't had some of like those fundamental ones of where are we allocating that time.
Right. So we still, I mean, what has been the practice for the most part is that the monitors, I mean, there may be some teacher assistants who go out to lunch, but depending upon them, like right now, I feel the amount of monitors that we have scheduled for each lunch period would be more than adequate, like in terms of what we like to think of as what we would like our staffing levels to be. And typically, I think it's like 6 or 7 monitors per lunch grade with a teacher supervising, a teacher who gets paid a stipend rate to supervise the lunch or recess. So in
all 3 buildings.
No. I mean, at Hillside, there's, and there's people here as well who, like, we have our own lunch supervisors here, and we also do use monitors. We don't have as many in this building. In terms of the recess coverage, I think we have maybe 3 with a teacher supervisor, but at Hillside, it tends to be like 6 with a teacher supervisor, so 7 people, and then they may have the aides either doing an additional like person. But I think we like to see 6 people out on the playground in different quadrants of the playground. One thing that had come up, and not necessarily tonight, but just to assure you that any training that we provide, we do provide our our monitors with we offer them the same training. Not only offer, we require them to come to the training. So just so for your, say we just did a CPR training, we do offer that to monitors. And we, so in terms of their ability to like supervise lunch or recess, we require of them the same level of, a teacher assistant who may know the kids a little better, you could say, well, are they better at lunch? But, we hold anyone who's supervising kids, we hold them to a standard.
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
I think it's important to realize where this is growing out of, and it's growing out of the board approving really increasing the quality of our special education services, and we're doing that, and we're not legally required to. We're not legally required to, and a lot of our other districts don't do this. We're creating ICT classes with really beautiful ratios of general ed to special education students. We don't have to do it. We're doing it because we believe it's the right thing and we believe it's what's best for children. That has now caused a need for more assistance in the classroom. So I think it's very important, to realize that the population of special education students is not as great as it is in other districts. And we are right now budgeting for aides to be there for all the content areas. And what we're saying...
And specials, yeah.
And specials as well.
No, I'm sorry, for this year, Lisa, I just want to
I'm talking about for next year.
Oh, sorry, for next year.
So anyway, and what we're saying is there may be a problem or there may not. We don't know. I am a little nervous, especially as we're doing a 2.55% tax hike based on the bond, to put in money into the bond that we may not utilize. Here's my question. Should the need come up in the fall, and we haven't put that in there, my understanding is we can typically do a budget transfer to find that money elsewhere in the budget and provide. I think I have more of a comfort level with that, knowing that the money is there elsewhere without putting an additional burden on our taxpayers for an unknown. We are hiring a master schedule because this person is really good at scheduling. So the problem may not occur, and if it does, it sounds like we have the resources elsewhere in the budget to be able to find the people to hire the person to go in and fill in those gaps. Is that correct?
It is. I guess my only concern was just with some of the unexpected additional staff that we've had to hire in the last 2 months, the contingency that we have in our budget, going into it with a very, already assigning it to others. I mean, I think there would always be a commitment if it can't work. We can make it work and make it happen. But I just want to, just also and I think that's, I'm just going to offer you the option. So if in fact it were to happen and we would need to hire people, can we do it with this kind of pulling resources or making, to your point, like I could say, hey, Joe, we're not doing X. I'm using just buildings and grounds for an example.
Our litigation, our legal fees, we've
Sure.
over budgeted, and we can take a budget transfer
Can I just get
from
some
there.
clarification? I mean, I hear you saying we can always do a transfer, and I hear you saying we can pull it. Like, money doesn't grow on trees. Like, it's coming from somewhere, so we have to stop doing something else. So at the end of the day, that still hits taxpayers at some point, right? Or we're cutting something else. Is that
We're
cutting something?
This isn't like.
We would make some like budget adjustments. So if we went into next year, I mean, there is, like I said, a small level of contingency still in. But again, as I gave an example of this year, that's why you need. I mean, as much as people, they're like, oh, that's a line by line item. When the two people showed up and they need one-to-one aides, you hire them. That's just. We're required to do it. So I just want to make sure it's very clear that if we do go forward and say we're committed to doing this, that if anything else comes up, I mean, obviously other than a need such as that, and we would have to either, which we can always do, go into our reserve account. You can do that. The board can authorize money taken out to increase the appropriation of reserve. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we are in a very, we're going in a little bit tight because although we're in a good place and we've been able to kind of, thankfully with just different things that have, bringing some programs back to district and things like that, we were able to kind of handle some of these unexpected additional expenses within next year's spending plan. I went back over line by line to make sure we had all the staff and that it looks like we're good. There's just not a lot of money in the overall budget for unexpected issues. So, I mean, if you were to go in and we needed 3 teacher assistants next year, if there were anything, we would just have to be really conscious of that. And then either, and I would probably go in and I would probably have a conversation with the money that I would say is we still have some control over, whether it be purchasing furniture. There are things that we can absolutely just say, you know what, we're going to have to hold off. And again, nothing that would be fundamental to somebody's class operating, but we can either decide to hold off to the end of the fiscal year, meaning next year, and to kind of hold on to some money that if we needed, to make some shifts in that spending.
It's a question, but is a question whether we add some contingency or just decide that we're going to take our chances?
Yes, that's the question.
Really what we're trying
That's
to
the
do.
question.
Yeah, that's-
I just want to say, listening to what you're saying, Maureen, I think the question that you're asking is, are we as a board committing to what model we want to support in terms of ICT classrooms? And just for me, as someone who has co-taught for years, teaching's hard, and co-teaching is a beautiful thing, but it is hard. And you rely on that support person, your TA, as really another teacher. And in a really good co-taught classroom, kids don't know the difference between their teachers and the teacher assistant. There is no difference because they are an integral part to your classroom. And I think we finally, as a community and as a board, have said, we know that this is what works for all kids. So this is why we're doing this commitment to have 2 ICT classes on every level, which is an amazing thing, and we're so ahead of our other neighbors. And that doesn't matter to me. I just think it's what's good to kids. So I think that we have to first answer that commitment. And I can say where I personally stand, that I would like to see the model maintained as it is, because we know that's what works best for kids.
Can I ask this question along those lines? Sorry to cut you off, but this is the piece that I've just been this is just a general question. When I look at this table that Lauren and Maureen put together, and I read across diagonally, I basically go, this year's first graders, rising second graders, go from 1 ICT class with 2 teachers and 1 teaching assistant to 2 ICT classes that comprise 4 teachers and 1.2 teaching assistants.
I have some of the knowledge about this, that, maybe in the absence of the special education director, Amy, that I could answer some of these questions. But if not, I'll shut up. I mean, it's really.
Let's see where Tim's going.
Yeah, I think, and so you can tell where I'm going to go with this, but when I look at this as, to a certain degree, a layperson, I see that as, for that population of 113 students, that seems like a net add, a net sort of beneficial student to teacher ratio shift. recognizing the issue of sort of comprehensive coverage of that teaching assistant, but at the same time, there's now an additional ICT class, which has taken the student population and spread them more thinly across the teachers. So I would think, you know, as a lay person, I guess, I see that beneficially. Reading across second grade to third grade, there I do see a net draw of 0.8 in terms of teaching assistants, meaning you had 2 classes, you're staying with 2 classes, you had 1 teaching assistant, we're moving it to a 0.6. And that comes with the various, no, meaning.
Can I just comment on something you said
Yeah.
before you continue? I hear how you're processing that, but when I see 19, whether it's 19 or 25 children, it's not, oh, these are my special education students and these are my general education students. As your as a teacher, you know, you might have, and just as someone who has to differentiate for all learners, regardless of whether they have an IEP or not, I hear what you're saying in terms of we're creating 2 ICT classes, so there's less children with IEPs in each classroom, but that doesn't mean that that your job as a teacher is easier just because there's less children, because you can just as easily have a child who's struggling across all different areas who doesn't have an IEP. So I just wanted to, and that your job is to differentiate and meet for all of those learners. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, listen, I get it. I get it that it doesn't mean that having, you know, this additional person. So I guess, like, let's take the third grade example, because we'll go down one more, and you go from this third grade, which we all know is a large cohort, and that's 1 ICT class right now with 1 teaching assistant. It's going to be in 4th grade, 2 ICT classes with part-time teaching assistant. Now, I hear the point that you're making, which is just because it's a smaller population doesn't make it easier, right?
Doesn't mean there's a less of a need.
Doesn't mean there's less of a need, except that the ICT classroom has 2 teachers in it. So that need, so like if I look back to the 18-19 classroom, and let's just hold the need concept constant. Like for these third graders, there's 3 teaching professionals addressing educational needs. In the 1920 year, there's 5.2 teaching professionals addressing a constant need. That, to me, again, there's the scheduling issue of having the teaching assistant, you know, through the major content areas, but on the face of the spreadsheet, this looks to me like for a, you know, we're going to just use this concept of a fixed need in 1819 transitioning to 1920. We have 5.2 teachers. So while I do acknowledge that, you know, for example, the second grade, by that kind of logic that I'm using, the second grade rising third graders, they are quote unquote short, if you will. But the third graders look to me like this is a you know, kind of a definitive win. And it sort of ties to Lisa's point in terms of the district trying to do the absolute best it can for our students with IEPs by having a low student teacher ICT number. But maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe this is...
I do just want to add, because I think it's really important to clarify that I think the board is committed to making sure that these aides or assistants are there if there is a need there. And the question to us is, do we want to affirmatively put in contingency money, or do we just want to say that we will find it in other parts of the budget should we need? But I think the commitment of the board is clear and should be noted. It's just a question of where are we going to get the money from?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think there, you know, what I understand from Maureen is that there are 283 minutes that a teaching assistant has every day with contact with students. And we know for certain from the administration at Hillside that 90 minutes of both ELA and math will be covered. And so then it's really a matter of 102 minutes to cover science and social studies, which they don't do for 102 minutes every single day. So it's a matter of making sure that of those 102 extra minutes, that they're with the lead teachers doing that content. And I think that we can make that commitment, and whether that means, you know, an $84,000 contingency, which is what it would be, which would bring us $166,000 under the cap. I think it's important that we consider that, and I think I really heard that it's very likely to be possible with the master scheduler that's coming in, but really having 102 minutes as the sort of framework, I would say that if we task the master scheduler to make sure that those 102 minutes were in classrooms when they're teaching content, instead of, you know, additionally providing coverage during lunch or recess, I think that would be the optimal use of both their skill set and what our students need.
I'm understanding, it sounds like we have two protections built in to make sure the kids are covered. We are paying the guru master schedule, who's so great that we can't even get him till the end of August, and we have other areas in the budget where we can take money from.
Yeah. He actually just, I don't know if I give you the latest update, he can come the beginning of August. He actually called because he had, like, I guess that opened up. So that actually was good. And no, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, there are, I guess, just because we've had some unanticipated additional expense, I just want to, you know, my concern, I think we'll be okay. And if the board, if we then have to go back, and then just to be clear that we may then need to decide not to do some things or purchase some things next year if we find ourselves in a situation where we have to buy the teacher assistants. So that would just mean tightening our belts elsewhere, which again, we can do. And then if in the, I don't want to say worst case, if there are other unanticipated expenses that pop up next year, we may find ourselves in a position that we either have to, like, tap a reserve. If we have, like, similar to what happened at the end of this school year, if that were to, which doesn't, I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but it can. And if that were to happen, then I just wanted to just obviously make the board, you know, aware that, you know, we've talked about having a little contingency, but this would more or less, like, make us to be very, you know, in a very tight situation, which is fine. Again, we have everything. I think from a staffing standpoint, we're in a good space in terms of overall staffing. But if it were to go where we would need 3 extra people, we would then have to either maybe adjust some other purchasing, which is fine.
I mean, I think this is a priority. This is, you know, the supported learning for the youngest students in the district.
Yep.
You have to hold back for your own purchasing or other decision making. I think that makes sense.
I mean, the one thing that is important, and one of the things that we can maybe do is some of the only thing that was, like, when I think about some of the work in terms of the building that it was scheduled to occur is some of the renovations to Hillside, just to kind of shift around some space. But again, it's minor.
And I was going to say, some of that seems like it would make more sense to wait till the bond work starts anyway, so that we're not doing repetitive work.
Yeah, but there's just a couple, and again, I'm talking about, like, minor kind of things. And again, as it relates to, as you know, there were some open concerns, like if we needed another music space. I'm kind of talking about that, if we needed to do some sort of renovation to either the cafe or the small gym or something to allow for that. That's what and then there are a couple other rooms, though, we do have to kind of, and they would, long-term, they would not be undone later either. So anything we're doing would not be things that we would then undo in the bond, because that's something I think I said to, you know, we don't want to do that. So that, and there may be, and like I said, some purchasing and things like that, but we'll certainly look at it and tighten up. But again, we would just be aware that if we then ended up having, where I didn't have to come to the board and, you know, because we had the ability to handle those unexpected emergencies this year, but we're not going to probably, you know, have that luxury next year, which is fine.
So can I summarize where I think we are right now and just get a sense of what the board is, where everyone's thinking right now? I mean, it sounds like there's, I think, first and foremost, a commitment to, I think Lisa put it really well, supporting all learners, quite frankly, and that this is a model, and specifically we're talking about the ICT classes here, but this is a model that curriculum leaders at the elementary school and others involved feel could work. And one of the big question marks is the master schedule. And when that master schedule comes in.
This is such a master schedule.
Right.
Master.
We call him the scheduler. I'm not sure how much of a master he is, but hopefully.
Lego movie.
We're putting
we
a lot
have to call him master when it comes to it. He only answers to that.
But there's some,
Mr.
the
Master.
minutes are there, to do, I think, what we're hearing can work, what people think can work, in this model of using 0.6 per classroom, 1.2 across. The question is, can we actually get the right kind of bodies in the right places at the right time? And that's
And I think that's when I was saying the 1 to 3, I know it sounds random, but there may be with the schedule where it may work on certain grade levels, but there could be, I'm just thinking like say with FLES or something where for the students, maybe in certain, just the timing of that may require another person, to kind of make sure it works. Because what we're not suggesting is adding back the current model. We're suggesting that we're committed to keeping the content areas covered. So that's what I'm saying. So that's where when I was coming up with the 1 to 3 scenario, that's what I was alluding to.
I mean, so what my opinion on the topic at this point is that, number one, I think commitment. I think everyone on the board shares this commitment to education, commitment to curriculum. That's the number one commitment. So if something's pulled, something's lost, it's going to be some replacing of windows or something will be pulled back for a year or two. So the question is, do we put that contingency in or not? I would be inclined not to put it in.
That's fine.
Personally,
I just wanted to offer it to you.
Look, that's one person's opinion. There might be 6 people in the room that say that's a bad idea, and so that's fine. That's one person's opinion. Because I do come back to this conversation that we started earlier in the fall. We've talked about it throughout the year, which is this commitment to fiscal responsibility, and that we're really trying to find a way. I think we all realize we've been relying on the savings account for a long time. And so we're trying to find a way to really just cut back on spending in a responsible way. Each year, I think we could make an argument, well, but a little bit here, a little bit there, but it adds up year over year. So I think that together, this idea of what seems to be a really productive path forward, one that has still a very good amount of teachers and teaching assistants to students, along with that kind of release valve that we're all committing to here in public right now, that we will pull back on something if we need to. I feel comfortable moving forward with that. I guess the question in my mind would be, how do we know it's not working? If it's not working, like when and how?
Well, I think that's the point of having another person coming in, because if they're going to give you what that staffing looks like, and if it was something prior to making that decision,
it's just the staffing number, right? Okay.
I think just seeing what it looks like on paper.
I think we just agreed it's all 4 content areas
Just the 4 content areas,
need coverage,
right.
and then can I just say one thing? And then I was thinking about the same question, and I think the answer from my perspective is that at a minimum, all 4 content areas are covered. That winds up being the most minimum base case. But then there also needs to be a method in place or a system in place where, prior to the winter break, we do get some feedback from the building whether it's working or not. We need to hear this is not working, whether it's because we've talked in the past, right? It could be something like transitions. Right, where it's making this you get my point.
Yeah.
So I think that just needs to be built in.
I talked with Amy Cases about that, and her perspective too is that if this model of having teaching assistants within the instructional content area and not necessarily to other portions of the day, how would that look if it wasn't working for kids? And her response, it would look differently for each child, but overall, there would be more behavioral issues. And whether that behavioral issue comes out in transitions or comes out with the specialist teacher or even comes out back in the classroom, that they would see increases or changes in behaviors that they had not previously seen in kids. So, she and I talked about thinking about some kind of method of tracking that with the teachers that know the kids best, so that we can see if it's
that would be good.
It's great for data collecting, but I just keep thinking about, like you said, the person who gets affected are the children, and if you're not transitioning well and you're having these behavior problems pop up, that's going to affect you throughout your whole school day, and that's going to affect your learning. So it makes me a little uncomfortable when we're saying, oh yeah, we'll collect data about kids' behaviors or what effect that's having. But then what? Like, that's November, that's January, like that's months of schooling where that's happened to kids. So I'm a little uncomfortable when I think of, oh great, we're going to have this great data tracking system, which is wonderful, and I think that we should have that across the board, whether we were looking at changing a model or not. But I just need to say that that makes me uncomfortable, because who suffers are the children.
What is your take, I'm curious, Nanisha, about the increase in ICT classes, the increase in ICT teachers, so the ratios being lower as it impacts?
Well, I think that as it impacts behavior, is that your
Yeah,
question?
as it impacts behavior or any other
Well, I
concerns?
mean, in terms of just behavior, it's great that we're moving in this direction, because like we talked about, there's 2 actual teachers, which creates a closer classroom rapport when you have less children, and ideally less behavior problems in general, ideally. But I'm just throwing my 2 cents out about the transitions, because we know that those are the most volatile times for children, because they're going to be kids, and it's not, doesn't make them bad, but that piece just makes me uncomfortable, because I see it every day when there's lack of transition structure versus when children have that support. So that's what I just wanted to make sure that we all keep in mind as well.
Anyone else have thoughts on kind of how to move forward?
I mean, I think we're talking about sort of unknowns, right? Like, I hear your points. Your points are good. I don't know what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. And I think that there's, I think it's a pretty good effort that I see of putting together a pretty comprehensive approach to our ICT classrooms. And I think the combination, with a commitment of the board to making sure content areas are covered and having a mechanism by which we're at least looking at it and checking back, I think it's a good place to start. I think it's a place to start that I'm comfortable with, given my knowledge. And
I just want to add, I think Nanisha's point is well taken about the importance, I think, really of checking in and checking early to see how this is working. And I think your point about November, December, we're already too far into the year. So I think checking in and checking early is something that'll be just really important, because we are, tweaking a model. So.
Okay, so what you'll see the next time is we'll keep the budget where it's at, but just acknowledge that there would, if the need would arise, that we'll address that. But in terms of the overall spend, it'll be the same.
Are we going to talk about, I really liked Lisa's idea about the rising second graders and the rising fourth graders.
That's not a budget conversation, though? That's more of a curricular
So I was
conversation?
going to ask, is that something that we need to discuss, or is that?
I mean, what I can do in the next few weeks, if you would like, and you want to schedule it, maybe it may even benefit, toward the, not the very end of the school year, but maybe in May, because we're getting families now registering for the following year, and just to see where we are in terms of the overall enrollment number. If there is any change in either of those, I don't think there would be a tremendous, but I mean, just in case, this way it could just also may confirm if there's more kids coming into that current 3rd grade section. That may make you want to make that decision, like with all the information.
Is that a decision we need to make, or is it, I mean, it's not.
Well, I think you want to make it at one point, because in fairness to the classroom teacher, we would be moving people to different grade levels, and they would need to.
Could we do
That's
this?
more of a curriculum decision.
I was
with
going
the
to say, could we ask Amy Casey's for her opinion on this, and maybe get that ball rolling? And I can send you all the numbers, although you could probably do them as fast as I can.
It was something we looked at, but I guess just at the time, it was because, just.
It was more striking with these numbers. So yeah, let's see if she can give us a statement, say, in the next 4 or 5 days. Another question, with these new ICT classes, we're going to have to do more hires for special ed. That's correct? So as I recall, I think last year the hiring didn't happen until very late in the year. And I know other districts will hire pending approval of the budget. And I think that would be really helpful if we could start doing these interviews now rather than wait like we did last year. So could we do that?
Yeah, I think just from my understanding, so what we had, as the board knows, some retirements also at the K-6 level in terms of special education staff. So I think as part of the overall like process of like posting that we have open positions, that they're looking for candidates with the assumption that this ICT class would be. So I know they're screening and doing all that. So, I mean, I can just make sure that they're doing it, keeping in mind that there would be, and making sure candidates know that there's these other, I think even some of our internal people may move to ICT who may be, so I.
Yeah, as long as we can get,
Yep,
all those
absolutely.
open positions, I think the
Absolutely.
sooner the better, so
Yep.
we don't, run into
I
problems.
believe
in
that
the
is happening,
summer.
but I'll confirm
Thank
that.
you.
Yep.
We've spoken to admin about that, and the fact that last year, it's true,
There were two
that I was
there.
amazed when I would see the number of people who weren't hired when they got here.
Yeah,
But
that's not good.
whatever that was, in the example mentioned earlier tonight with Lou, the principals are really working at it, and we'll just add on to the additions.
Because if you wait till the summer, you also can't do demonstration lessons, and that's critically important.
Do you still have that Schedule B issue, or we don't find out till June or July? Wasn't that an issue last year?
Well, I think, what you're speaking to, so again, the budget is based upon what our current offerings are this year for both sports as well as any other Schedule B that we currently funded this year. So what has been occurring the last few years is that there will be, some years more so than others, a few Schedule Bs that are being proposed by the HTA to the administration, and sometimes vice versa. There may be one or two things that the administration is interested in kind of funding as well. And there's a negotiation that happens in June typically, but the one thing I just, again, I didn't want to just add a number to the budget because I didn't know whether the board, without knowing what those may be and coming through some of, like, trying to grapple with all these other, things that if that were to be the case, we would either have to look at maybe what we're currently offering and decide to either, if there was something with less students involved where we could trade it off. So I think we would be hoping that we would try, if there were things that were really important to fund, that maybe we would look within what we're doing. And if there were some things that may have been a drop in interest, we can kind of propose that as a trade-off. So I think that's the way we're going forward. But we didn't put like $20,000 in for new positions. I think last year was a little bit different because in addition to having 2 high school musicals, which is not normal, the typical for us. So we kind of started off in a place where there was about $15,000 worth of additional stipends that is not, typical for us. So in addition to anything else, it was like, oh, we can't, it made that conversation more difficult. I think, unless there's something I'm unaware of, I don't maybe see that list being as long this year. Maybe I'm wrong, but, it seems as though there were a couple of moving parts last year, and we had added the book fair, which was, again, a new program that is accounted for next year, like some of the newer things that we did. So in addition to needing the additional play people, we also had that, which is not, usually it's like a few things. So that conversation will still have to happen, I guess, in June, but with the hopes it would be minimal and be able to afford it within the current spend.
Okay, let's keep moving onto the business items now. So does anybody have, I know there's, some people have got some comments around number 4. I think it's still number 4. I have a printed.
Yeah, are we tabling that? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it, because I don't.
Should we pull that one out?
Yeah, I think you should, only because I didn't get a chance to give you the buckets of how that broke
Yeah,
out
and I think
for
that's
everybody.
going to be useful and very material to the conversation, so I just don't know that there's a lot to talk about now on that one, unless someone wanted to share something, but I think waiting till we have the buckets and the redacted
will
stuff.
just say, when we're getting information, since one other question I had, and it might be just something for you to gather, is because it sounds like right now, our attorneys are saying, oh my gosh, you're using more hours, it's costing us, we're not getting paid as much. But I recall, and I think it was a conversation I had with you, that we used to not use many hours at all, and I'm wondering, did they ever offer us a refund?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think would be helpful in the discussion, which I may have to, I can go back and pull a few years of bills as well, or just see if they have it in kind of a summary form where we can kind of compare it to see the usage. I mean, again, now, that being said, I've heard them alluding to where some years seemed less and some months, but, we may have been 10, but right, I think it'd be good to see 5 years.
It all comes out in the wash, and
that's
maybe
right.
for, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we underutilized them.
So I think we could do a
would be
look
just
back of
helpful data to get.
oh, absolutely. So I think, let me start by pulling the last 4 years, or even 5, I mean, it could be 5, but just because it may, and then just putting it into a chart just for, and maybe and then I could just kind of add some
think 5
content if there was
years.
something that was like a little bit different in a particular year, so that you can, because sometimes it is
And
hard
just
to think
While
about
you're
it.
doing that, Maureen, they've got that in a time system, a professional services time system.
Okay,
They may be able to
perfect.
just run a report
Right.
versus you having to go back
I mean,
through
only because
paper bills.
I had the bills, but they kind of just sent me the bills. They had, I mean,
Right.
the people.
I'm just saying, they
but
may
it
be able to
doesn't
push a
necess-
button and it might take you
Oh,
3
okay.
hours.
Okay, that's fine.
So I would ask
Listen, I
them.
would prefer that,
Right,
but
exactly.
they may not go in and say, we had some residency issue, like, they may not bucket it that way. They do it based upon the attorney that helped you.
Right.
That's how they'll provide it. They're not going to give you maybe that little bit of a backstory about which each of the different things.
But it'll, at a highest level, it'll just give us a ballpark
Oh, I'm
numbers.
sorry. Yeah, that's right, because that's what we're looking at.
Right.
That's perfect. I'll do that, and then if there's 1 or 2 years that look higher, then I'll look at the bills.
Then you can go into the
That's
detail.
right.
And could you also,
Yes.
in your journey on this, let us know when the last time we bid for attorneys?
Yeah, it was actually 11-12 school year.
Okay, so it may well be time for us to bid again. Not to say that we won't.
No,
be
we actually, we created we'll talk about the finance committee, but that was one on the list that we already had out. And I knew it was one that was like not super long, but I was like, wow, was that, like, I was trying to remember like the time frame. So that is when we actually updated the bid document to put it out for like a May.
Yeah, that sounds right, because
Yeah.
I think the comptroller would definitely flag that
Yep.
one.
Okay, so we'll take out item 4, business items 1 through 3. Does anybody have any questions on those?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve business items 1 through 3?
So moved.
A second? All in favor? Okay. Placement for CSE and CPSE services. And, yeah, so let's just we'll take that. Do I have a motion to approve placement?
Moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. An addendum.
Yeah, this one, I just wanted to make sure it got on here today. This person has been working in the district, and I kind of alluded that we've had some new positions that have opened up, and some of these people have been doing it while we were waiting to formalize the position. So I just didn't want to delay this person any further in terms of their appointment, and I just got it confirmed this afternoon with the middle school. So she's been an existing employee. That's why you don't have all the resume and things. So she's been working in the district, and she was a part-time employee who has been a one-to-one aide and filled in for people in the past. So it's an existing employee who's been, I think, in the middle school for the last 3 years. So this is really a modification of this individual's appointment to full-time.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the addendum appointment? A second? All in favor? All right. And 2 other appointments. Mancino and the Schedule of B appointments. Any questions on that? Do I have a motion to approve 5, I guess it's A?
It's 5.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, minutes from March 25th. Any questions on the minutes? Have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
I abstain.
Okay, policy report?
Yeah, the minutes from last month, policy committee meeting are attached, and included with it is at the very bottom, there is a revision to the section 4 of our code of conduct, which is a requirement by NISBA to name the Dignity Act coordinator and their role in our code of conduct. So if you follow that and read it, the red printed items are the new and required pieces of our policy, and that's there for our first read. And the committee just wanted to note too that NISBA is recommending that our code of conduct incorporate restorative justice practices in our code of conduct instead of just punitive consequences for students. And they've provided extensive suggestions for where to include that in certain language. And it's not a requirement, but the committee feels that we want to go that route and begin revising our code of conduct, which is no small task, but we're happy to take that on.
I would make a suggestion. I love the idea of including restorative justice. I think that's something, I think it would be really important to have the input of our principals as well as the input of our diversity committee or our diversity coordinator, because there obviously is a long history throughout the United States about children of color being disciplined differently from Caucasian children. So I think this will be best served by having eyes beyond the Board of Education on it. As I said, the principals and either the diversity coordinator and or the diversity committee.
I'll just check. I think these are the changes to the code of conduct that require a public hearing.
Okay. There even this requirement of the DACA coordinator?
I'm going to check it.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe we should vote on it.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Well, it's a first read tonight.
It's
I mean,
And just something that I wanted to point out that we added into it because it was part of what NYSBA required are a lot of the requirements for DASA, which we found that we don't have a lot of the structures in place that is required. So it sort of put a light on where we're severely lacking in some areas, including that district DASA coordinator, which we recently appointed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area.
Is that reflected in this 1 through 7?
Right, those are the
okay.
things that need to be done, such as prevention committees. I will give us a shout out because of Janice Mateo Toledo, our diversity coordinator. Part of this policy says that we have to address personal biases that may prevent equal treatment of all students. And we recently had Diane Goodman in and was very positively reviewed by the staff that talked about implicit bias. So we're working in the right direction. We just got to keep the ball rolling on that.
Or did we approve the change to the fixed assets? Okay, thank you. I think that's when I went to the last time I've been there. So I was.
It'll teach you to go to
thank
the bathroom during a board meeting.
I know. God, that was the one I was holding out. Thank you. Sorry, I figured I should have went
so we'll
back.
stay tuned on a
Thank
second
you.
read because if it does require a public hearing, we'll.
And can we have it distributed to our admin and to our diversity?
We haven't done that.
Yeah.
It would require a lot of work to include all the language that they're suggesting into our code of conduct. So I would suggest that the committee begin working on it, and then once we have what's the parameters suggested by NYSBA, that we involve our administration. Because,
And there was a thought that there might be some buildings already working towards this. Like we had talked about, I think the middle school already
Hillside has a handbook. that's
already
separate.
has some procedures in place that are restorative justice. So some of our principals are already doing some of this work. But we want to just make sure that we're aligned K-12.
Great.
Does that go in this specific policy? That would go?
This is a piece of the policy that.
Okay, I was going to say, because this is just yeah.
section.
This is the essential
4.
partners,
Yeah,
right.
this is
Okay.
section 4 of a very big piece of policy.
Right. Okay. There was, that was it, right?
Yeah.
That was the only thing to discuss?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Recording minutes. I think we started a conversation back in December about how to record minutes. I think the conversation at that point was we were going to ask people in the community. We didn't do that. But I think we may be able to talk about it without asking people in the community if there's a feeling that we want to change it. But I think, Lisa, you had requested to put it back on. Do you want to just kick it off with your?
Yeah, sure. So this topic came to be, it was when we were discussing the bond. I think it was when we were sending the final version off to the bond attorneys, and I had made a long statement that evening detailing what I thought were the issues with the bond. And then I submitted that statement to Janine, and I think, Doug, you instructed Janine not to post it because you felt it gave more weight to one person's view than another. I will say, and I'm not trying to be a gotcha, but it's hard because it's staring me in the face. I did find in our July 9th meeting minutes, there's a statement that you submitted as to why you felt that we shouldn't appoint Nanisha and instead should have a 6-person board. And I have a screenshot of it in front of me, but
Lisa, that's when we started the conversation, because you had submitted a variety of things that were also posted in full verbatim to the, so we've all done that before.
I guess what I'm saying.
To point one person out, I don't think is actually accurate. That's when we started the conversation, and it's never happened since then.
Okay,
so let's just be clear, okay?
Okay, but I'm going to ask you also, please don't interrupt me. My statement is not a verbatim statement as opposed to what's there. All I'm saying is that it seems that something shifted. That's why I said I'm not trying to be a gotcha, but it's one of my problems with the governance of this board. I feel that the rules we play by have shifted, and it's not necessarily clear. So anyway, I had submitted that to Janine, and then I think I even submitted a paragraph, and all of those were kept out of the minutes, which was troubling to me because I had community members asking me, and they wanted to know, and then I had to basically email them. So then we started to get into...
Please, okay, go ahead, please.
Then we start...
At the board retreat, it was told to me that the decision would be just to record motions and no attachments.
We all discussed this together as a board and aligned on that. This wasn't any gotcha.
When was that?
It was my directive that the board, that I was not to attach written statements to the minutes because it was determined at the board retreat that you would not do that.
In August, that board retreat?
I don't know, I wasn't at the retreat.
That's the only retreat I was at.
Yeah, I was given that directive.
In any event,
That was August.
so what this has led to, because I can tell you, I never agreed to I understand the bare bones of the law say you just need the votes. To me, that's not meaningful. And I think it's just led to the situation now where we don't have a clear idea of what our minutes should look like. We have erred on the side of keeping them more bare. I have to say, as a board member, I find it very frustrating that we don't really have a record of our work. Unless you're going to watch the video.
We do have a record of our work, Lisa.
No, I'm just going to ask, Doug asked me to present, and I'm just going to ask to please not be interrupted. If you want to search for something, like I wanted to search about what Charlie said about the assistant superintendent, it's not there in the minutes. I had to then figure it out from the agendas and then go find it on the videos. This is not how you should run an operation. So as a board member, I'm frustrated. I can only imagine as a community member. So I think this process that we've been using of limiting it to the votes, especially since we don't vote on a lot, like we didn't vote on that whole discussion on special ed, but that's an important discussion we had. That should be in the minutes. You know, we made a commitment there. I'd like to see that in the minutes. I don't want somebody to have to find it on an agenda and then go search through a video. So I think in terms of transparency, it's important that we have well-articulated minutes. And if the challenge, and I keep hearing, well, you bring your bias, whatever, other boards figure that out. It's not rocket science. And again, it has the added protection of a 7-member board reading them and making sure that they're accurate. So I am going to go back to the position I have continued to hold, that minutes should be meaningful. It should talk about each item on the agenda. They don't have to be lengthy. It could even be a discussion was held about whether to have aids, ensure that there are aids for every content area. The board committed to do such. That's all that has to be, and that is not rocket science. So I would say that that's the model we should use, that every topic gets some kind of summary, be it 1 line, be it 3 lines. I think Janine can do a great job at it. If we want to farm it out, we can put out to the community. Send us, job application. Look at the minutes from tonight, sample them, and we'll have a little committee who decides who to hire at a set rate. But I just think it's important for transparency, and it's important for good board governance that you have minutes that are accessible and searchable.
I just want to weigh in, because we have talked about this a number of times. I mean, this has been at the retreat, this has been at a couple meetings, and I think the majority of the board has agreed on what the minutes are. So I understand where you're coming from, but the majority of the board disagreed with you before. Don't cut me off.
I'm not cutting you off, Jeremy.
I also want to say that I am very happy with the way that Doug has governed the board this year. And so this notion of bad board governance, I think actually he's done a great job. I think we've been very transparent. I think we had, I think the transparency that the the community wants from us. We've been very transparent. We've had many community forums about the bond. We've had many things that we've put into the enterprise. Everything's on tape. So I disagree that this is bad board governance. I actually think that we've spent a lot of time on the minutes discussions after we've already agreed on it. Unfortunately, the majority disagreed with you, and so we've come back to this conversation. But I think that maybe next year we'll decide on a different way to do minutes. But for this school year, I've been fine with it, and I don't think that is a sign of bad board governance, personally.
Jeremy, I must respond to you. We did not reach a decision. The last time we discussed this, we left it off that we were going to do a survey, and Nanisha and I had said that we would create a survey. We did create a survey. I submitted it to Doug. Doug said, we don't need to do this. Of course, everyone's going to want to have more information. And I said, why don't I reach out to the fellow who used to do our minutes? And he said, sure. He's not available. So, Jeremy, no, we never did reach a conclusion. That was the last time we discussed it. And Doug said, well, in fact, we said, let's hold it off till after the bond. So we did not reach a conclusion.
We reached a conclusion in the fall, and then it came back up. And I watched the video because I wasn't at that meeting. And there was a point where you said, all right, if the full majority of the board is fine with it, I'll defer. And then the conversation kept going, and then it became this, let's do the survey. And I think that was just to appease you, to be honest, because I think everyone felt like we've already discussed this many, many times. So there's different ways that boards do minutes. We're not doing it illegally, so we're well within our right to do it this way. And also, there's other ways that we could do it. But we made some decisions earlier in the year, and I guess you weren't happy with them, so we kept on having this discussion come up.
I'm going to tell you, first of all, we couldn't have made that decision at a board meeting, at a board retreat, because I'm telling you, I don't remember it, but you're not allowed to make those kind of decisions at a board retreat. Second of all, I don't think this board has ever done anything to appease me, and if you all did, then you're not doing your job. So I disagree with you. But again, it was not a finished conversation. We were going to do a survey, and I have the survey. Why don't we do the survey? Why don't we see what the community wants? I mean, you like it bare bone. Why don't we do the survey? It's ready to go.
I mean, so my personal opinion on the survey is, I think there's some things we just have to make a decision on as a board. We can't survey the community on everything, and especially minutes. Look, I understand where you're coming from, Lisa, and I appreciate a really good set of minutes. I think we all do. And I don't think that's where the conversation really became a challenge. I think the challenge became there's a lot on everyone's plate, and getting that quality of minutes that we would all find useful was going to be very hard to do without bringing out an outside resource. And I think we got a number. It was $6,000 if we want to do verbatim. And then there was a discussion. And I remember, Lisa, you commented you didn't want verbatim because it wasn't as useful. And then, we're probably talking about somewhere in the ballpark of somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 a year to do these minutes. And I think that's kind of where we...
Or Janine.
Or Janine, but Janine's got so much on her plate. Look, I've had conversations with Janine, and it is a very long process that was taking hours and hours. Janine's not a full-time employee. It's not it wasn't a, there's a there, I get it. There's a there in creating those minutes. I think it's a budget item that we would have to talk about, and it's a different, it's just kind of a different conversation. I guess the conversation is, I guess the conversation in front of the board right now is, does the board want to go through the process of finding a strategy that would, it's an additional cost to do this right now.
I just want to say one thing. I think the challenge this year became that the board meetings went on for 4 or 5 hours on one topic. And to try to summarize all the back and forth of 4 or 5 hours of conversation on one topic became almost impossible. With meetings, you look at the minutes that we used to do, when meetings were more succinct, it was easier to paraphrase the conversation and the outcomes. But many of the board meetings this year really had no outcomes. There was a lot of discussion going on, but never any clear direction after those discussions. So I think that's where some of it comes into play. I think when they were easier, and that's probably where you want full transcription services to, hear what everybody had to say on the topic, because it wasn't definitive. There was like no definitive, this is only my perspective on it, no definitive outcome that could be stated. Like tonight, we discussed some topics. There was a very clear statement as to what you were looking at and what you wanted stated. But many of the board meetings this year went far longer than that. If you look at some of the community forums, I did paraphrase what every person who spoke brought up for a topic of discussion and how the board responded for the most part. So that was kind of a clearer thing. So I think that becomes part of the issue in the discussions. And then also, I have to tell you personally, no one from the public has ever called me and asked me for the minutes.
Well, they're online.
No one, you're saying that there aren't minutes online. But
No, they are online, they're just spare.
Yeah, no one has ever called me to say, can I get more information about this topic?
I don't know that they would, but 2 quick points. I think you're overstating the price. I think for $100 per set of minutes, I think we'd find many excited people to do that. That would make the cost about $2,000 should we decide to go out of house. But let me ask you this. So is this board saying then it wants to do the bare minimum of what the law requires, which would mean that there would be no mention at all in the minutes of the discussion we just had about the AIDS? Is that where the board wants to be?
Jeannie makes a good point. Jeannie makes a good point that this isn't really an issue that the public has brought up. It's an issue that you brought up. No one has ever asked for the minutes. No one is complaining about the minutes.
You know what, Jeremy? Nobody ever complained about the cost of out-of-district busing, even though we spent $500,000 more than Dobbs Ferry, except for me, and now we're addressing it. So the fact that nobody has called Janine and said, I want more minutes, I want more information, I don't think is what should guide us. Again, because then they haven't called about out-of-district busing.
20-minute pocket of time.
And we could be home watching the NCAA final game.
You know what? Go ahead. If you guys want to have minutes that are not useful and are not particularly transparent,
so Lisa, I don't agree. I see this a little bit differently, and we can go back and forth about this, and we will again, and that's good. But I think we may all have to agree to somewhat disagree. I see the value of minutes. I don't think this is a board that is not being, I think this is a board that is being transparent. The bottom line is if somebody really does need to look back at something, there is an official record because we have everything on video. And granted, that's not the easiest way to do it, but it is the most honest and realistic way to really get a feel for what was being said or done. And I personally I'm not in favor of spending the money to hire someone. That's not how I would want to spend the money. And I think that's a decision that each person has to make when we're trying to figure out about money. I just don't think it's worth, I don't think the bang for your buck that you get for spending the money when we could be spending it on other things that we need. And finally, I don't want this issue about whether we have minutes available online, how detailed they are. I fear that this is becoming sort of a symbol of different sides of issues on the board, and that this will get sort of played out going forward. And I think that's a mistake that I want to caution us against, that I don't think...
let me just... we had come to some sort of, I don't want to say agreement, but didn't we think that a good compromise, and I could be misremembering, was that we put the timestamp of the video with the minute? I thought that was sort of
and I think that's I think that the only thing this board should discuss at any moment ever going forward, minutes existed in a world where there wasn't video. We now live in a world where there's video, and video that you can timestamp, and people can jump to topics. They can grab an agenda. They can say, that agenda item's interesting. I'd like to go specifically to it and see what was discussed. That is...
I don't remember the premise of the conversation. Okay.
Is that a realistic
thing to do? I think that's the only discussion going forward.
But I'm going to say it's not currently done. So, for example, when I was trying to find the discussion of the superintendent search, the assistant superintendent search, you couldn't find it. The only way you could find it was to go to the agenda and then watch a lot of the meeting. So it's not in that format now.
Let's
our
talk
minutes
about going forward.
are not in usable form.
So
But
can we
did
try
talk
to...
about that, and
Is that a realistic
That
thing
would
to
be a
do?
help.
Is that something we have to vote on? No. Okay.
But let me ask you, I'm just going to go back to this question. So the discussion about special education that we had in the budget, will there, in your guys' minds, the way you're saying, does that get written up in the minutes or not? It's not a vote.
It's time-stamped on the video.
So then Janine will have to put in, because right now it doesn't even have that. It
Okay,
didn't
but
say there was a
Janine, is that
discussion
a
about the
realistic
assistant
thing to do?
superintendent. So you will write, there was a discussion about the aides.
And then sometimes
Yeah.
things fall short. My plate is
I mean, I feel
very
like
full.
this is the same discussion we've had.
The board does not even know that
No,
I'm
it's
working
no,
on
it's
some of the
totally
board
fine.
members'
No, it's totally
But
fine.
so
I
you'll
think-
identify the various topics, and because they all have to be identified then.
Stamp it to the
timestamp
agenda.
them, I write right next to the ones that I did, is when that, like if you're talking about minutes, it will say when it starts on the video.
But you have to identify the subject. Like I said, the assistant soup wasn't even written there.
In the minutes, in board docs, in the minutes, it says next to it, video, with a link to the video and the time on the video that you're discussing it.
Well, that would be better.
Can you link the agenda to the times, can you?
But I think similarly, I
So-
truly think, to the extent that any community member is looking for information, let's use this current example around special education, we are all accessible. If you look at this agenda and you see, I didn't see the word special education, you can say, I wanted more information on this, fine. It's under the budget discussion at this timestamp. Like, I don't think that there's additional verbiage that's even needed. We have agendas that go out, they have attachments, and then if you were to really just timestamp to the agenda item, like, I don't, because people that are invested enough to go to the video are equally invested to send an email and say, I wanted to follow up on this, which part of the agenda? Fine, it's in the budget section. Okay, great. Now you can go and access it online.
Tim, just to follow up about why that's problematic. But again, I hear where the board's coming from, so I will stop. Here's why that's a problem. Say I'm one of the SEPTA parents who was sitting here, and say in November, going down the road, November, I think the aid situation that we've agreed to is not working, and I think the board discussed this. I'm going to use the search function to try to find this, because if I ask Tim Bear, is Tim going to know the date off the top of his head? And why should I even have to bother calling Tim Bear? Maybe I don't know Tim Bear. Maybe I don't have a comfort level with Tim Bear. I should be able to search, but I will not be able to find it in November, 6 months down the road, because it's not written up. It's going to be under a budget discussion. This is why minutes are boring but important, but they are the heart of democracy, because that is how people know what's going on. Some people watch the video, God love them, okay? But some people just want to read the minutes, or they want to know what was said 6 months ago. So under this plan, I just want everybody to understand that we are making it more difficult for the public to find things that were discussed in the past, and we are making it more difficult for ourselves to find things that were discussed in the past.
Is access to your democratically elected officials, so that you can actually reach out to them and that they do have a responsibility to respond because you are their constituent. So if you can't find something that you want, you email, which is why we regularly get emails. So I don't think that this undermines the heart of democracy. I think we do a darn good job of making ourselves available so that if you have an issue, you want information, we jump to getting it for you. That's why I think that this board is a very good board that's gotten a lot done this year. And I think if we go about with timestamps and people use technology to get the information they want, I think we'll be in a very good place as we go forward.
Tim, I'm going to agree to disagree with you on
As will
you.
I with you.
All right, you want to move on then?
Sure.
We can, Janine, I have some thoughts we can talk a little bit about. Update on cybersecurity?
Yeah, so as the board knows that we decided this year to look at that as the focus area, I can tell you the work is well underway. It's a fairly significant amount of work when they do an audit in this particular area, because it requires first, it requires, getting all the documentation from all the various stakeholders. And also, we've worked to schedule the auditors to go over to actually the BOCES, who, as the board knows, really handles the majority, oversees our entire technology in terms of our software and all that we rely on them to be the kind of oversight of that. So the auditors they go to BOCES location, they're working. They have a list, everything in terms of all of our users, all of the applications we use, every single application, software, student management service, financial software that we use, and then they, go to each individual department at BOCES to do an audit of their oversight into those items, as well as run audit tests on all of our information to also see where we may be deficient in some of our security protocols. So it's actually, I mean, a cyber audit I would say is probably one of the more intense areas because it is so extensive. And like I said, that work is underway and they've already gathered, like we had sent them, the list of required, information just from us. And also with BOCES, all the different people there that have to be rounded up and interviewed and provide to them. And they actually kind of look, and they're not that's why they actually go there. They don't rely on just telling them over the phone. They actually go and they're testing the systems and we had to sign, obviously BOCES, we say to them like they're required to kind of provide this on behalf of, that they're overseeing our technology. So that's kind of where we are. I know they're, in the next few weeks, they've started the work. They've already done some work. We had to send some things in zip file, and they are scheduled to be at both BOCES and next week and during, so it's definitely a few weeks worth of work.
So do
or
we expect,
a few more weeks worth of work. I'm expecting a draft report in May.
Is that something we review at the audit committee?
Oh, yeah,
first,
absolutely. And I think the
bring
whole
it right
board
to the
will see it. I think this would be a board topic, and it was very interesting because I think, I know this board has been interested in doing that, the cyber audit for a few years, and actually we're amongst like almost every district right now is either, if they weren't planning on doing it, they ended up doing one this year because it's just such a, every time we read the newspaper. So, the auditing firm was like, where many people are also doing a deep dive into their tech cyber.
And I think the U.S. Department of Education, as to last year, was encouraging schools to do this because schools were being socked with ransomware.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that was something, even when I would go to meetings and things, that was definitely like a big topic of conversation around the county. And again, although I think in some ways, we've made some strides in the last few years, it definitely is an area that I think is just, as the days go on, it's just always evolving and people trying to hack you and information. And I know a lot of the parents in the district also are very concerned about their students' data and what, because we keep everything now electronically. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, man. Lisa, you wanted to give an advocacy update on computerized testing?
Yeah. I'm not asking that we take any action, but I just want everybody to just start to get, literate in this area. So New York State has pledged that it's going to switch to online assessments for the grades 3 through 8 ELA and math tests. And the year, it's, I think, maybe 2 years away. I don't know, it changes. So anyway, what they've been doing is asking districts to participate. So I think about 20% of districts in the state did online testing last year and this year. And both years, it's just turned out to be a complete disaster. This year, like last year, there was a large online system crash that was so bad that New York instructed schools that were doing it to not test on the Wednesday of testing. That's how bad it was. I believe Briarcliff was doing this, White Plains. Kids were having trouble logging on. Some kids had finished their tests and it wouldn't save. They tried to go back.
To retake it.
Well, we're getting mixed messages from the state. The state has said that no child will have to retake it, but then we're getting reports from school districts that they actually do have to retake it. And then there's a question, do those count as participating students or not in terms of opt-out? Anyway, it was so bad that the Council of New York State Superintendents, the New York State Teachers Union, and the state PTSA has immediately called to fire the computerized testing vendor, Questar. It's been disappointing on the state level with Commissioner Mary Ellen Elia, because last year she said, this is unacceptable, what's won't happen again, and she's saying the same thing again, so we'd kind of like to know, what did she do in the interim? But it's something to be on our radar, that should we ever be asked as a district to do this, and should we have the ability to say no, my strong recommendation would be that we don't do it. I also can't imagine, I know they give you math scratch paper, but you're supposed to show your work on the computer. I cannot imagine, as a lover of math, doing that on the computer. And I do want to just raise one more thing about the state test that was really exciting, that for the first time, both the Chancellor of the Board of Regents, Betty Rosa, as well as the Commissioner of the State Education Department, Mary Ellen Elia, have formally acknowledged the right of parents to opt their children out of state testing. So they issued a statement several days ago, and I'm just going to read it. It's only a few sentences, but I think it's important. As students in grade 3 through 8 take New York's state assessments this week, we appreciate the efforts of school leaders to ensure that parents have all the information to make a decision about the assessment that is right for their family. We would like to remind school leaders of the importance of honoring requests received by parents to opt their children out of the exams. While the federal law does require all states to administer the state assessments, parents have a right to opt their children out of these exams. To be certain, the vast majority of schools honor the parents' requests. However, we have heard of isolated but troubling reports of parents' requests being ignored. And I will give a thank you especially to Betty Rosa, because I have no doubt she was the leader in this. So
I think we do honor parents' requests.
Yes,
pretty
we
well.
do. We do. And
just remind me though, isn't there a financial consequence?
No.
With opting out
No.
if a certain number of kids?
There is a requirement by the federal government as well as by the state that you have 95% of your children participate. If you fall below that, no. What they tried to do, and we actually as a board wrote against this, they tried to say if you do it for several years in a row, we're going to make you take your Title I money, which is to help your poor children, and redirect it to get your parents to opt their children. We fought, you may not remember, but we issued a resolution, we sent it to them, and it was resoundingly defeated.
Right.
They can, if you have too many opt-outs for, what happened this past year, I can tell you, they've never given consequences for opt-outs, but this past year, what they did, and these are all being appealed, is some schools that had like 90% opt-outs, and the children that did take the tests were not representative of the entire population. They tended to be children from groups that historically performed low. They were being identified as CSI school and target schools. Those superintendents are appealing those because they're saying, this is crazy, it's really wrong, why are you doing this to us? Some of those have been granted, some of those are still pending appeal with Commissioner Elia.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, no public. For a second public comment, any Board of Ed comments before we adjourn? Okay, motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?